All right, good morning, everyone. Come on, it's sunny, it's bright. The Yankees lost last night, but the Mets are up tonight, Dennis. All right. With all the respect to the Brewers. Oh, did we mention that? Okay. Welcome to our duly noticed and duly scheduled meeting of NYPA and Canals. As always, you can see we've assembled the full crew again today. We have a full squad turnout around the official board table. B. Gonzalez, Cecily Morris, Michael Cusick, Laura Wheelock, Lewis Warren, and the aforementioned lead Mets fan, Dennis Trainer. Pleased to be joined by all of them, as well as Justin and his terrific leadership team and extended group. And with that, I'm pleased to call the meeting to order. Unless anyone has any thoughts or ideas relative to the agenda that was otherwise presented to us, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. And I think I officially skipped that this meeting was duly noticed as required by open meetings law. Contractors list, we've all had a chance to look at that. Report any conflicts, no late breaking changes or developments there. So please give us notice. Big day. Major moment in the continuing evolution of the organization and the ever increasing and increasingly exciting path that we're on as an organization. The primary focus of the day is strategy in particular relative to the renewables game plan and the expanded authority that we were given now 18 months plus or minus ago, and the initial outcomes of some really great work that the organization and the team. We'll hear from Justin, we'll hear from Vanilla, but this is an all hands on deck moment for the organization, and there's no organization better at those opportunities. So I'm going to spend a good amount of time talking about that. This is our coming out party, if you will, relative to our initial thoughts and ideas, the beginnings of an external conversation over the next 3-4 months to further vet our thoughts and thinking. So on one hand, it's not a fully baked cake, but we really like what we've put together and excited to share that with everyone. That said, we'll also pivot. Danielle and Yves will give us a drive-by on the refresh of our own strategic plan. We would be refreshing it mid-cycle anyway, but obviously with the impacts of the expanded authority, it becomes all the more significant. So they'll take us through where we are as an organization with all of that. And as with the renewables plan, we'll all have an opportunity over the next couple months to further vet, discuss, and debate some of that. So that come December, January, we'll be approving our refresh strategic plan, in January approving the renewables strategic plan. So while the beginnings of a dialogue around both key plans and vision statements for us as an organization, also reflective of an incredible amount of really good work that's been done by many people to ensure we're well positioned, best positioned to lead the charge forward through these increasingly challenging and important times. As we typically do, get updates on finance, not coincidentally, just coming off an incredibly successful bond offering that we'll hear more about from Adam. Knocked that out of the park again as an organization, speaks volumes of how we're received by the public market, the public funders. He'll explain it far better than I, but and just outstanding execution on that front. continuing great execution from Joe and his team. He will update us there in terms of operation in general, and Dave and Rebecca are back to bring us up to speed on canals as the season winds down. B told me she was out with their boat over the weekend. Adam fought his way through traffic. They do have traffic copter reports nowadays, you know, or it's called Google Maps, really. It's called Google Maps. Traffic copters, I think they took them out of the air, but anyway, Google Maps, I suggest you download that. Gives you real-time traffic updates. The red bar means it's backed up and you want to find an alternative route, okay? All right. With that, it's going to be a really good dialogue and discussion. Justin will quarterback and kick off the renewables plan and Hamanega with Vanilla. We'll have Danielle and Yves on a strategic plan, and then we'll navigate our way through finance and utilities, ops, and the rest of our typical reporting. But with all of that, no further ado, Justin, the podium is yours.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Morning, trustees, NYPA colleagues, members of the public. Thanks for joining us today on this big day, as you said. Well, very well said. Framing today's discussion for us, Chairman. As we have in the past, we've kind of been coming to you with sort of a theme of our presentations at our board meetings, and today's theme is going to be how we operationalize strategy. And so we're going to be hearing from Daniela and Yves talking about the Vision 2030 Renewed, our refresh effort, which, as you mentioned, in large part was driven by the legislation last year and the new authority to own and operate renewables, which was a major driver in that refresh effort. So we'll hear from them. We'll hear from Adam on some of the creative ways that he's making sure that we stay fiscally responsible in all of this great work. We'll hear from Joe and how he keeps our assets safe and secure, and then we'll hear from Alexis on the intersection between strategy and risk. She'll talk to us a little bit about how those two things come together. So, as you said, important sort of milestone in where we are today. The big sort of deliverable, if you will, today is, as you know, we said we'd come to you early in the process of the renewable strategic plan so that we could take input from you. As I think you trustees know, you've all had an opportunity to review at least the draft plan. This is our attempt to start a discussion with you and with the public around what that final strategic plan will look like when we come back to you in January for your approval. So this is the first step in all that, and we're excited to be coming to you with our draft plan today. And as you said, and then I just have to echo, this has been a monumental effort by the staff here in pulling this together in 18 months. I'm not so sure there are many companies, public or private, that could have done this in 18 months. Looking around the globe for renewables, project development ideas, strengths, weaknesses, successes, failures around the world. We did that. We staffed up an entire renewables staff here. We created financial infrastructure in order to enable that work. We'll be talking to you about that as well. So as you look at, if I can put up the slide of the timetable here, as you can see here, in May of 2023, the legislation was enacted. We quickly got to work. I won't take you through all these milestones. We've come to you along the way with these in terms of qualifying developers, setting up our own internal operations, sort of, as I said, looking for learnings around the world, U.S. Public and private sector on successes and failures. And so a lot of great work has been done. It's classic NYPA cross-functional collaboration that I think brought us to to where we are today. Couple things I will also today with the draft plan, we'll be we'll be publishing our this year's conferral report. We did one last year, as you know. This is our attempt to reach out to stakeholders. I think we did 50 or 60 stakeholders last year. And we'll be publicizing that plan as well, both on our website, the strategic plan and the conferral report. And this also kicks off the public comment period for the draft strategic plan. At the same time, we're advancing the tools that we need in order to enable this work. So we're going to have a couple of items for your review and approval today, which kind of create the financial infrastructure around this work. One is the creation of the subsidiary that the legislation gave us the ability to do. We think this is an important part of how we roll out and operationalize this work. And the other is the initial seed funding of $100 million for the renewables effort, which will create the first financial contribution to this effort. It's a sort of a placeholder, if you will. Obviously, we'll be taking input from the public around the plan. We'll be continuing to try to finalize projects and so forth. And obviously, we'll be coming back to you for more in the way of funding down the road. But this will get us started. And then, of course, in January, we'll be back in front of you, hopefully with an effort for you to approve the final plan.
Yeah, Justin, as I look at this, jumps to mind too. As much as we talk about it as being our plan and we're the lead and all the rest of that, talk about pre-qualified 84 potential collaborators. Really, this is about my metaphors, how we can do the loaves and fishes routine, right. How we can enable and accelerate and collaborate in a way with the private sector. We're not here to compete. We're here to enable and ensure success, for the collective group. So those partnerships and that collaboration is key and critical to this, right? I mean,
it's key.
It's a combined plan. We're on the point. We're in the lead. We accept responsibility. Excited to take it, but this is about how can we bring a lot to the party.
Exactly. Well, we do bring a lot to potential partnerships. We have some unique characteristics that can hopefully get more built. That's the idea here. If we partner with the private sector, we can get more built. And that was the whole effort. And Vanilla can talk to you a little bit about some of the projects that we're looking at that do contemplate partnership opportunities. But our effort, and we'll get to this later, our effort will be a combination of what we call greenfield projects that NYPA will build on its own, projects that we partner with others. Those could be projects that are already underway where somebody's looking for, a late entry partner to try to drive something across the finish line.
Yep.
Or early stage partnership opportunities. So all those are being explored and are part of the, part of the plan. But yeah, the partnerships are going to be key, key to the success of this effort. So just to kind of ground us all, remind everyone of all the other things we have going on here at the same time as this. So you go to the next slide here, just recapping where we sit today. I used to talk to you about 16 generating facilities, right? Well, we added one. We added the North Country battery. So now we can talk about 17 generating facilities. That's actually a utility scale, the first state-owned utility scale battery that's on the system now. So now we're up to 17 generating facilities. Our percentage of electricity on any given day varies a little bit, but it's somewhere between 20 and 25%, almost all hydropower. We've added transmission lines. I used to talk to you about 1,400 miles of transmission. Now it's 1,550.
Oh, sure.
So it's not a typo. So we're
trying to add more.
We are. It's going in the right direction. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And obviously, very proud of our stewardship of the canal system. 524 miles, celebrating the bicentennial next year. World Canals Conference in Buffalo. Our economic development efforts support 450,000 jobs in the state, and we do very quietly close to $250 million in energy efficiency and customer work around the state for our governmental customers. And a big reminder, we're doing that all with our own money. We're not on the state budget. We're self-supporting economically. That's a key thing in all this work. So we have to do all of this work, and we're prepared to keep driving and growing this work. And we're adding the renewables work on top of that. But that's where the creative financial efforts that Adam and the finance group are doing to try to make sure that we can get the most out of our balance sheet so that we can continue to do all this work. So that's just yes, Louis.
Before you leave this page, just as a board, we should take a moment to compliment you and your team. This is from a private sector perspective. I mean, we deliver, NYPA deliver, the team here delivers a fifth of the energy in the state. We deliver, of that energy, 85% is clean energy, 1,500 circuit miles of transmission lines over, 17 generating facilities. I just want to make a point. Some of the newer trustees have been on the board now for about a year, more than a year. This is an amazing record of operational excellence that we just wanted to say thank you all for, as we set the stage for today, because you started at the strategic work with the renewables, but this is what the team does every day. Everyone in the field, your engineers, your wiremen, everybody in the field is leading this. So I just wanted to
thank you.
Compliment
no, thank
you
you.
and the team
Thank
for
you.
this achievement.
Justin, just to add, if we could keep this in a prominent place on the website, and then I think add to it once we are building and start tracking, I think it'll be so helpful for us, for the public, to just see how we're growing and then how we are, getting closer to hitting our CLCPA targets. And I think just seeing this, we just added the 17th generating facility, just keep this going, I think will be super helpful. And then we'll be able to, again, just see how close we're getting to our targets and when, and all that transparency, I think would be very helpful.
That's a great idea. We'll definitely do that. So I mentioned earlier the conferral process. This has been very helpful, and it served its purpose. We've learned quite a bit. One of the as we looked at last year and this year's efforts, sort of three I guess common themes that we saw. One, and this is something that obviously the administration, the governor talks a lot about, and is an issue for the state, is just the question of affordability. And people talk about the energy wallet and how big is the energy wallet and what percentage of that is your overall spend. It's a big issue, particularly in disadvantaged communities. So that was a huge theme that we're keeping front and center in our work. The next, of course, is another piece of the expanded authority was the retirement of the peaker plants by 2030. So there's a preference there, obviously, to do that, and I think an additional sort of request, if you will, to try to see if we can use those sites for some other kind of clean energy with battery storage or some other energy technology. So we're hard at work at that. As you know, we had an RFP that went out for some of the sites. We just did an RFI for the Kent site in Williamsburg. So we're acting on that as well, but that was the second sort of common theme. And then the final one was from our hydropower customers. These are our economic development and governmental customers that get our low-cost hydro. They're sensitive to rates as well. These businesses are sensitive to rates because they count on low-cost hydropower to kind of make their processes and their work economic, and so they want to make sure that we're paying attention to their rates and that we're trying to keep those low as well. So trying to balance all that with the new work we're doing, new capital commitments and all, obviously upward pressure on prices across everything, and some of the instability in the renewables market that we've seen. But these are the three sort of big themes that we kind of took away from the conferral process that inform our thinking around the development of the strategic plan, and actually the development of our own corporate strategy as well, and how we look at that.
Not inconsistent with what we've talked about for years. I mean, throughout my tenure, very sensitive to our customer base and doing right by them, and in ensuring that as we step our way down from peaker and other facilities and hydropower, we're just progressively leaning into protecting and preserving what is the heart and soul of what we deliver. So,
exactly.
Reaffirming what's always been foundational for us.
Okay, so now we'll go to the map the new projects that are in the portfolio. So as of this time, obviously, first tranche of projects, first iteration of this will get built out in the years ahead, and we'll see more dots on that map over time. But we think this is a really strong effort out of the blocks here in 18 months. So Vanilla, and she can talk a little bit about some projects, but she's identified 40 projects that total about 3.5 gigawatts of potential capacity. We were thoughtful and intentional around trying to have good geographic distribution of the projects around the state. So you see, I think, pretty good distribution around the state and in each NYSO capacity zone as well. Yeah, we think this is really credible, strong effort out of the blocks, and we're proud of the work that the team has done. Vanilla, in particular, she's been the face of this work, so I want to thank her personally for all the effort that went into this. But it's a really classic NYPA business unit collaboration. Everybody was involved: finance, legal, operations, risk, everybody. So customer, everybody's been involved in this, and so that's what sort of the distribution looks like. Again, just a reminder, there's going to be more to come here. We're in due diligence with all these projects, so that that means we're negotiating terms, sometimes for land, sometimes for partnership opportunities, sometimes for takeover opportunities of projects. So it's a variety, and we think we've had good diversity, I guess, among the types of projects and all that we're chasing in this first iteration. So maybe with that,
Well, before you jump, big picture, what's your reaction to 40 and 3.5 gigawatts? Is that exceeding initial expectations? Has it been harder to get here? Are we on? I mean, give us some bigger picture reaction before we get down into the weeds a little bit.
I mean, I think as a new entrant into this market, this is not a business we were in. So to establish just the framework for going after these projects and then going around and trying to identify projects and then reaching out and connecting and starting to negotiate terms, I feel great about the number of projects and the capacity that we've been able to identify. Will we identify more? Yes. Could we lose a couple of these projects through attrition? That's very common in the industry. But we'll more than backfill those, with additional projects. So I feel good. And I know the team feels proud of the work that it's done. And we'll be back along the way.
Were we scrambling to come up with these 40? Was it hard to whittle it down to this 40? I mean, give us some perspective here on supply, demand, opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best sign for that is the response we got to the RFI, right? We had over 100 developers, all kinds of developers, big and small, reach out to us wanting to partner with us. So that meant that there was a understanding of the value proposition that NYPA brings, to the table. So we did a lot of chasing, but some came to us, and we had, like I said, we had that pre-qualified pool. But that was a good indication of, I think, and it made us feel like, we can play a role. We can play a substantial role here, and the market needs us. So that was a big takeaway. But yeah, we're super excited about where we are. A lot of work to be done. I think it's a strong effort. Now it comes down to execution, but NYPA is usually pretty good at execution. So.
Before Vanilla jumps into some of the details, thoughts, questions, anybody?
I just have one observation. The alignment of where the projects are planned and your public comment opportunities, right? So just to remember to align those as you go through the project, because of and I know that you only needed, the requirement was 3, right? Hearings, and you've scheduled 6 or 7.
Yeah.
But I think, it's important to figure out how to, for example, include North Country, not to take away from your thunder, as a way of just aligning where you're having your hearings with the locations that.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're gonna try to do something in the North Country where maybe we have something at the visitor center to invite people to participate in the virtual sessions. The way we set it up, and I'll talk a little bit about it, but there's gonna be 2 every day, 1 in the afternoon, 1 at night, into 6 different locations. Then we're gonna do a couple virtuals, but maybe we can set something up at the visitor center, you know, to accommodate and try to drive some interest in the North Country, because you're absolutely right. There's several projects up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, there are no more questions on that.
Laura, you got a question or comment?
Yeah, maybe I can throw out a couple and then maybe Vanilla, you can pick them up as well. I think, having an understanding too, looking at the map and just trying to, look at all the zones and the locations and the areas, how many are in disadvantaged communities. And then I think with the engagement piece too, where we do have our peakers, if we can do special attention to outreach to those communities and notify them, like, we're coming, we have this plan, but you are here, like, you are in our front line. What do you think about this? So again, it kind of touches on engagement, which I know is coming up with the map and just, I guess, the focus. And then, again, we're trying to do labor, we're trying to do DAX, we're trying to do the affordability and bring all these pieces together. So I know that's a big overlay. And then we can go into more questions between all of us.
Yeah, that the timing is right, because I was gonna open it up to questions for Vanilla and then
Look at that.
so that's perfect segue into that. And then I'll come back and talk about next steps and close it up.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, everybody in this room, actually, beginning with this man here, because tomorrow marks my year 1 in this role. So, and it's been a cakewalk. And there is some sincerity in that statement, because that slide, Trustee Warren, when you said the 17 generating facilities that we have, everything else we already have continues to be the foundation upon which we were able to get to this map today, right? If not, it wouldn't have been easy at all. So talking a little bit about how we got here, we looked at different kinds of projects, including projects that are potentially at risk. You've heard through last year that several projects were dropping out or canceling and moving away from the contracts that they had at NYPA. So beginning there, we looked at possibly where could NYPA focus on our own greenfield and self-developed projects. So working with publicly owned lands with our sister agencies and other local governments as well is another aspect that we looked at. Third was what other large scale, like private sector projects there could be, but also distributed generation scale projects that we could look at. Lastly, of course, working with our actually EJ team, we've been in conversations with several community-based organizations to develop kind of like a portfolio of in-community projects that are tangible, that the communities can in a way touch and feel, kind of projects that could bring a greater impact as well. So when we looked at from all of those perspectives, at the same time, taking into consideration, this is a first inaugural strategic plan, right? The expectation is that there will be more of these coming in the coming years as well. So focusing on projects that are at a more mature stage or a state that have the higher potential to bring online or come online sooner rather than later, so we can kick this off. Talking to several of the 84 developers that we have pre-qualified, 84 to date, I'll say, because we do have a few more that we have received. The RFQ closed on September 30th, so I think we have 5 or 6 more that we are in the process of reviewing additionally as well. So, and talking to them about projects they have, several of them brought projects that they actually have and where they saw value in partnering with NYPA, doing some fatal flaw due diligence. We're still in the process of doing full due diligence from here on all of these projects to better align with our own internal strategy, the technical assessments, our bottom line of how NYPA usually builds projects, including our enterprise risk management, the governance process, our project impact scores, and all of that kind of stuff. So, and that work is actually happening right now as we speak. And obviously, like Justin mentioned, we are expected to see some attrition as well among us from this list. So from the 40 projects here, 31 of them belong to private developers that we are working with.
31 out of 40, you make sure we.
31 out of 40 are with the private sector. 9 are NYPA self-developed. Out of those 9, 4 are large scale projects. When we say large scale in New York State, anything larger than 20 megawatts. Our 4 projects are between 20 to a little over 100 megawatts that we have. And we're looking at some distributed generation, which is sub 5 megawatt scale in New York State by definition. So we're looking at some of those projects as well. So, Trustee Vlog, to your question, 13 of these 40 projects are actually directly located in disadvantaged communities. So every single project will come with community, not just community engagement plans, but community benefit plans as well, that we are evaluating as part of our diligence, and also looking at opportunities if we could further that with our own involvement as well. But 13 of them are directly located in DACs. So, and what it constitutes is about a significant portion of the projects, over 75% or close to 75% of them are solar PV projects. And that reflects today's market situation, and even the NYSO interconnection queue, if you look at it, predominant portion of them are solar PV for various reasons, again, spanning from technical all the way to commercial and financial reasons as well. And the ability to bring them online quicker than compared to some other technologies. About 11% of them are battery energy storage systems, standalone. Another 11% is, you'll see when you look at the map, there's only one kind of like point that shows a wind project, but that individual single project alone constitutes about 11% of the portfolio. So wind tends to be usually much larger in scale when you're developing. It's land-based wind project. And NYPA self-developed and the DG projects all account to about 6% of the current portfolio from that 40 projects. I want to give you kind of like a couple of examples of the impact, the scale of these projects and what they could mean. One, I'll take around self-developed projects. We've been working with our sister agencies, thanks to Maribel's team to begin with, but also Lori's team. If real estate weren't there, we would have been in big trouble to secure site control. So we're looking at developing a 40 megawatts, a little over 40 megawatts injected capacity solar PV project at a closed prison in Chemung County. So it's about a little over 60 megawatts for installed capacity, and working with ESD, working with DOTS, working with the Office of General Services and everybody. But we're also collaborating with the county IDA. We submitted an interconnection application, so hopefully when NYSO publishes its next queue, it's in this cluster study this year. So we're not losing time. We don't have to wait for another 2 years, which is when the next NYSO interconnection window opens, but we got it in the queue along with the 3 other projects. So we are collaborating with the county IDA to look at potentially turning this into, for lack of better words, I would call it a clean economy zone, where pairing renewable generation and potentially attracting clean energy industries, whether it's manufacturing or something else, on site, that could all be co-located and be benefiting from each other. That's kind of like the idea. So, and it is, while the town itself is not in the DAC, the site itself, but it is in proximity to DACs with surrounding neighboring towns. So we're looking at benefits that we can bring there as well. That's if you think about kind of like a large scale project that NYPA is self-developing, right? We're officially a renewable generation developer now. The second project, I'll take a small project that we are working with the private sector on. It's a 5 megawatt solar PV project in Greene County, New York. And that particular project, we are intending to develop it as a community solar project that would directly basically qualify for our REACH program, which means it would offer bill credits to disadvantaged community households on their electric utility bills. So those two are just a couple of examples. I mean, I'm open to taking any other questions. We know about every single project we have there, 40. I could talk about all 40 of them.
Well, we've got the next 3 months to do, have more of this discussion, but yeah.
So that's kind of like, in a way, just a flavor of the kind of flavors of projects that we have in our pipeline currently. So working very closely with the private developers, and we do kind of understand we have stakeholders and some of them have shareholders, right? So hitting that balance as well on how exactly do we optimally build projects that's a win-win situation, especially the biggest win being for New Yorkers and the state.
What have you learned over the last 12 months? What are your takeaways sitting there today for where we find ourselves and what you've navigated to how we can even better go forward for the next 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, being very candid, the reason for even my being in this role is because I know what NYPA is capable of doing, and I know how strong of teams across the organization we've got and the support we've got, right? That was not a lesson. It was essentially a reiteration and emphasis that I knew, and what we counted on as a team, we continue to have that. Some of the lessons learned are within the marketplace itself, on how things have been happening when it comes to renewables in New York State versus, in a way, the new reality of the marketplace. So where the private sector has been
Embellish on
struggling.
that, explain that.
Yeah, so simply put, when you think about New York State, a lot of people think it's what has been kind of prohibiting or inhibiting renewable projects from happening are the macroeconomic conditions, inflation, interest rates, supply chain. But some of those elements are not unique to New York State. They're the same, whether it's Texas, Arizona, California, or us, right? We see projects continuing to happen in some of these other states, including Midwest, but not as much in New York State. The reason being, there are other challenges or unique attributes being New York State. That, again, it's simply put, the sun doesn't shine the same way in New York as it does in Texas or California or Arizona. So how much you can get as production, because everything is dollar per megawatt hours, right? So how many megawatt hours can a 100 megawatt solar project in New York State can produce versus a 100 megawatt solar project in Texas produce varies by almost 6 to 8% in some cases, depending on the location. And the soil here is, we are blessed with plenty agricultural soil that's very moist heavy, right? That warrants actually specialty and additional skill, how you actually go about building the project. We're not just blessed with moisture and good soil that may or may not be the optimal ones for building, let's say, solar PV projects, but we also have sometimes harsh winters, depending again on the region. That warrants not just additional cost increases, but something as, if anybody's a civil engineer, I'm an electrical engineer by training, but they call them frost caps. It's not a significant cost adder, but it is a labor intense kind of process. So you need unique labor. It takes much longer to build a project and physically execute a project. So there are so many situations and scenarios just on the technical side. And add on top of it, where we are and how we go about building projects, including availability of skilled labor to the workforce development needed, and of course, add on top of that the macroeconomic conditions. That's what those challenges continue to only, in a way, not go away, but exacerbate in some ways, because there's been renewables development in New York State, right, already. So some of the optimal and prime sites where you could develop these projects are pretty much occupied. So how exactly now, you're talking about, in a way, second tier kind of sites that now we are dealing with as an industry or as a state. So those all add up, and that's what makes it into kind of like a new reality. And it was a co-learning along with the private sector, our own internal teams, everything that we're doing. What was refreshing, speaking with some of the private developers, where actually it was refreshing to them, is what they informed us as they were talking to us. Their initial reaction when we issued the RFI and the RFQ was, oh, another state entity now trying to get involved. And some of them responded initially, and being very candid and transparent with you, more like a courtesy, because they know what NYPA is capable of, and just throwing a stone and see what they could hit, right? And as we started speaking with them, they said, oh, this is so refreshing. You guys actually know what you're talking about. And I was like, yes, because look at us, we have 17 generating facilities, 1,550 miles of transmission lines. We build, we own, we operate, we know how to build, we know how to own, we know how to operate, right? So that came as a breath of fresh air to the private sector, where they feel like, okay, we now have somebody who actually understands and knows and experiences the same things as we do. So they've been very transparent and open as we're looking at these projects on everything technical, but their commercial books and other things as well. So we are like truly partners collaborating with them and extending that to all of our stakeholders to be part of this from the get-go.
Well, we need 1 + 1 to equal 3, 4, or 5 if we're going to be successful. So earning the credibility or gaining the confidence of our partners is critical. So I guess listening to you, we need to make sure we talk about what else we need to do to better enable our enablement. I mean, we're in this game to enable success of others, but we're smarter, wiser for what the missing pieces are or how to sharpen the focus. We can't hit all the targets because of the inherent limitations that we can't otherwise overcome as a state or otherwise. Yeah, how do we ensure that we just continue to lean in a more effective and efficient way?
Great, very well put, because that's exactly kind of like the approach and the lens that we're taking as we kind of further and progress this entire pipeline and looking at future opportunities as well that we could append.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
Lori.
guess if it's okay, just to build off of that theme a little bit, obviously the word attrition came up earlier. So if you want to dive into that a little bit more, do we have an expected rate? How does that compare to the private developers? What is our plan? In my world, I have like 5 backup plans for everything I do in life and in work. So how are we doing that? How are we getting ready as you're out there? And I guess that also feeds into the tranches, right? Like this is the first tranche, but second, third, if you want to dive into that, I think it'd be very helpful.
Absolutely. So in general, when you talk about greenfield development, the typical rule of thumb from conceptual, like you've seen a site and you want to develop there in the renewable energy industry is, don't be surprised, it is about 80%. That's kind of like
80% is
85% attrition rate in the early stages of development.
okay.
That's one of the reasons why we're looking at a combination of projects at different stages, because so we have that flexibility and diversity, and we can kind of like diversify our risk as well in some ways when it comes to our portfolio. So with matured projects, it could differ from between, this is a wide range, not as narrow as the 80 to 85, but we're talking about potentially 30 to 60%. And some of the challenges involved, including commercialization, right? We have not seen the last round of results from NYPA from their October solicitation yet. That's still ongoing. What does it mean? And some of these projects are in those solicitations. And while some of these projects, other projects are gearing up to co-bid along with us into the next NYPA's Tier 1 REC solicitations, for example. So we are looking at opportunities even to kind of for offtake with our own customer base as well. We have a couple of signed LOIs there as well for offtake opportunities. So whatever could get the project to the finish line is how we're approaching. And the due diligence process itself that we have established is cross-functional from across the organization. The 6 different streams that we're touching is, of course, strategic assessment, looking at who the counterparty is there a credit risk to anything else that, again, not in the sense of eliminating, but potentially mitigating and having a strategy to address that particular risk, right? So strategic assessment, technical assessment, how strong is the interconnection application they've got? Is it really possible to actually build a project there? So we have our system planning and interconnection team supporting us there. Then we have our permitting and licensing folks looking at, okay, how do these permits look? What is the sentiment in the local communities, or how exactly are we going to be able to build these projects, right? Are there any red flags? Are there any environmental concerns we should be taking into consideration as well? Or are there mitigation elements needed? And then that's on the technical side, just not in passing. Then we have obviously the regulatory and legal framework as well, looking at, do they have firm partnerships with EPCs that can actually build these projects? Do they have line of sight to procuring, let's say, we do require domestic content for us to be able to be eligible and take advantage of the elective pay under the IRA, the federal tax credit, simply put, right? So what opportunities we may have on any specific project, and what is kind of like the labor and skills and arrangements that they're entering into, or they have had conversations, which is also a critical element for us, right? That's on the legal and regulatory framework, right? Real estate, how solid is their site control arrangement or agreement that they may have for a specific project? And looking at from stakeholder alignment as well. Some of these may be, during the different stages of project development, some of these might fall off, like engineering design. Once it's completed, we've reviewed, we're comfortable. We don't need probably any further technical diligence done on it once it goes into execution. It becomes a different level of diligence, but not for that aspect. Stakeholder alignment, on the other hand, will be needs to be done all the way through, not just until it is built, but actually, I think our folks can attest to it, right? Even after it is built as operational assets that NYPA will have under its belt. So I know I'm missing a couple of other kind of like due diligence streams here, but we have engaged groups from across the organization, of course, finance. That will be remiss if we don't say it. What exactly are they looking at from commercialization perspective? What is their mechanism, like the financing structure? Is there another potential equity sponsor or somebody they're looking at? What does it mean to us? How does it align, or how does it not align for our bottom line as NYPA? All of those are being taken into consideration, and that will kind of further inform part of like potentially some of the acquisition as well. Thank you. I know that was last. I'm so sorry.
That was
No, it was
very
great.
helpful.
Yeah.
That was right.
Informative, helpful, exciting, reality check, all the above, and a good table setting for the next couple, 3 months here to further the dialogue. So
I do
appreciate
plan
that.
to take Friday off.
No,
Having slept, Vanilla, having
Yeah,
slept.
and we,
See why you said it's a cakewalk.
we thank you for your leadership. We've clearly got you nominated for comeback player of the year this year, you know, so we thank you very much for coming back and grabbing the reins on this one. So
Yeah, so maybe I'll just wrap it up here
Yeah.
on next steps. We talked a little bit about
Oh,
this.
wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
In her presentation, she's so well versed, but I'm thinking to myself, what you're saying has to be key pointed
Mhm.
in the information that's going out. Because that tells us what we need to know, that pulls all the other information that we have into a very understandable, exciting, dynamic presentation of, this is what we've got so far. Here's what it means. We recognize attrition, or we're looking at that, to see how we can avoid some of that, or maybe partner with the partners, or let the partners, you know, your presentation is top shelf. And I just want to make sure that when we're giving this information and presenting it, that it's presented in that form, because I understand.
well, here's how to
I'm not
synthesize
an
it.
engineer.
Well, Trustee Morris, I think that's an excellent point. You probably have sort of decision tree flow charts. Just take a typical flow chart to say, you know, identify a partner, identifies the site. We have to do site work, we have to do engineering work, there's technical analysis, there's go, no-go decisioning. We had to check in with finance. Finance says this is economic, this is commercial. We have to check in with internal audit. Is this, does the partner check these boxes? And if you do a sort of an illustrative flow chart of a typical thing, I think it pulls it out for the public to understand the work that we're doing at a very hardcore substantive level, but the complexities and the opportunities, as Chairman says, the opportunities for us to be the thought leader and the project leaders on many of these.
I think we can do that. And in fact, it's actually nothing new that we have developed for renewables. We are just leveraging our existing tools already
Yeah.
internally. Yeah.
I think the ultimate risk for us is to overpromise and underdeliver. So we just want to ensure that, we're transparent, we educate and we inform and bring the rest of the world along with us, and progressively bring the rest of the world
Agreed.
up. So there's a good, increased common level of understanding in terms of why New York is different than Texas and Arizona and California and Nebraska or whatever, and what we're focused. I mean, just that continuous, educational component of this is going to be important.
Yeah, and I think as we do more, as we get involved in more projects and we're involved in more negotiations and we're building out the team, we're just going to keep learning and
We're smarter every day.
Correct. And that'll start to make its way into future project opportunities.
And I think the hearings are going to be a good opportunity to
Yep.
continue to inform, educate, as well as, listen.
Mhm.
Okay.
So just to summarize, we talked a little bit about this, but next steps here, we're embarking on the public hearing process, 6 locations around the state, afternoon and evening sessions, 1 virtual hearing, also afternoon and evening. And that's obviously designed to inform the final product that we come back to you with in January. Obviously, we'll be talking to you along the way as well as you think about what you've heard today and what you've read in the strategic plan, and all that'll come together to make its way into our strategic plan that we'll bring to you in January for your approval. We'll be back together in December, so we can talk more about it then with you. But then we'll look to finalize it and file it with the legislature by January 31, 2025, which is our statutory deadline. But again, it's the beginning of many such reports, and this effort will continue, and it's a top priority for the authority, and that will be reflected in our Vision 2030 renewed corporate strategy as well. So, and we understand the obligation we have. This is what we do. We do new things, we do big things, we execute well. And I think we'll be able to demonstrate that we've been able to deliver on this new authority.
Justin, if I could, I appreciate that we're all learning, right? It's a new process for everyone. But when I was reading the draft, I kept getting confused about who the audience was, right? Sometimes I
There are
thought I was the
several. There are
audience,
several.
sometimes I thought somebody else was the audience. So if we're reaching into new communities, if we're reaching into just new areas, we need to think about how we write for that particular audience, because I was a little confused about who the target is. If it's for the legislature, write a
fundamentally, it's
legislative update, right?
Right.
If it's for the community that we're building in, let's write for the community that we're building in. So just to think about that, I think it'll just help with the transparency issue that we keep bumping up
Agreed.
against.
And there's nothing that says that we can't have, a more of an executive summary, if you will, of what we file with the legislature.
Absolutely.
But the audiences are many, right? It's the
Yes.
legislature, it's stakeholders, it's community groups, it's all residents of New York State, all ratepayers, all communities,
Right.
upstate, downstate. So yeah, there's no shortage of audiences, but we can think about whether we could produce something
Yeah,
in the
to
way of an
tailor-
executive
tailor,
summary.
Customize,
Yeah.
the messaging for,
Yep,
the audience,
right.
always relevant. Because the last thing we want clarity, not confusion.
Right.
Yeah.
Better understanding, not the opposite, as I said. So perceptions and reality, well, here's what we told you. Well, that's not what we heard. Well, you didn't understand what we said. Well, that's because you didn't say it. I mean, we don't want to get caught in,
Agreed.
that. So,
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll get to work on that.
understood.
We'll get to work on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And just a few points, and fellow trustees, feel free to jump in, because I know this is really important. We're releasing this to the world, and now we're going to be starting off the public engagement, and that's key. It's something that's very important to me. I know it's very important to you all. Along with that note, I think just, that outreach. I'm sure there's a whole outreach plan with press releases and notices and whatnot. But again, focusing on the communities that we are, in, where those peaker plants are, and really engaging them. When we have the hearings, if there are touch point opportunities, like the map, being able to have people come up and be like, you know what, this is great, but what about geothermal here? And I live here, and what about solar? I think, again, using it as a constant collection process for that engagement, I think is really important. I plan to go to as many of them as I possibly can get to, so I'm excited for that. And then Justin, can you talk about, is there a place that the public can submit comments if they can't come, if they can't do the virtual option? Will we be able to collect them to the website?
Well, yeah, we have the website for the conferral report, which could be a resource for continued comment in the public hearing process. So that'll all be open. We've got an email address, so we'll make sure that people are aware of those different avenues that are available to them to comment.
I think that's so important. We had a rally here a couple of weeks ago, and there are advocates pushing us to do 15, and we have this plan, we have our steps. We are NYPA, we can do this, and it's really exciting, and I can't wait for the engagement process to start. And thank you, Vanilla.
Thank you.
Well, we're at the front end of the engagement process, so great
Correct.
kickoff. Again, clearly kudos and celebration for getting us to this point. Yeoman's work has been referenced multiple times. Exciting, proud to find ourselves where we are. A great work one. And all that said, the work has just begun. And we've yet to hit the real starting line. So these next few months are critical. We look forward to working with you. Let us know what more we can do throughout all this process, and we'll continue to interact and engage as well. So,
Great.
okay.
Thank you.
Well, with that, we'll stay with the strategy theme, but broaden our focus organizationally. Daniela, I think you're going to kick us off. Welcome. Good morning. Nice to see you as always.
Thank
Talk
you.
about Vision 2030, refreshed, renewed, and the beginnings of a dialogue with all of us about that as well for the
Yes.
next couple months.
Yes, good morning, trustees, members of the public, colleagues. Excited to be here. I hope you guys have saved some excitement. I think we had a really exciting discussion around NYPA Renewables. We're excited about NYPA Renewables, and we're excited about Vision 2030 Renewed, and that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about. So I'm pleased to introduce Vision 2030 Renewed. It's NYPA's strategic plan or roadmap for transforming the state's energy infrastructure and delivering on our vision of a thriving, resilient New York State powered by clean energy. So it's always good to step back. Next slide. So I'm going to just take a step back and talk about Vision 2030. It was launched in 2020 after the passage of the state's nation-leading Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Vision 2030 recognized the critical role that NYPA would play in achieving the goals of CLCPA, and it leveraged NYPA's strengths. So just to remind you, it consisted of 5 strategic priorities: partnering with customers and the state to deliver clean and affordable energy solutions, pioneering the path to decarbonization while ensuring reliability, resilience, and affordability of the state's electric grid, facilitating the rapid development of transmission assets, and you've heard about some of the successes we've had, preserve and enhance the value of our hydropower assets as a core source of carbon-free power, flexibility, and resilience as the state's energy grid evolves. And finally, adaptively, and not quite finally, but adaptively reimagining the New York State Canal system for the economic and recreational benefit of New Yorkers while driving operational efficiency. Next slide. So since 2020, we've been hard at work making this vision a reality. We've made tremendous progress towards achieving these goals, and in subsequent meetings, we'll talk more about those achievements. Want to fast forward to 2020, 2024, the state budget, when the state provided NYPA with expanded authority. This expanded authority, along with the fact that we were approaching the halfway mark of the Vision 2030 roadmap, prompted NYPA to revisit Vision 2030. Over the past year, can you go to the next slide? I think, or go back, yes, this slide, thank you. So over the past year, we did so in a very thoughtful way. We worked cross-functionally. Vanilla talked about that. We do our work in a cross-functional way, and we solicited input from communities and customers to inform how we partner with them and the solutions that we provide. We considered how federal and state policy was reshaping the industry and NYPA's new obligations under the expanded authority. And so through a series of interviews and workshops, we engaged with our board, with staff from across the organization and at various levels of the organization in discussions about our programs to date and new opportunities to create value for customers, communities, and the state. We also engaged with thought leaders in the industry to ensure that we're incorporating leading practices and energy technologies into our plan. And so the result of that is Vision 2030 Renewed. And so at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Yves Noel, our Chief Strategy Officer, who will present on some of the details of Vision 2030 Renewed. And what you'll hear from him is that we have made some changes. We've incorporated our expanded authority, but many of our priorities remain the same. They remain relevant and aligned with the goals laid out in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act and NYPA's vision, a thriving, resilient New York powered by clean energy. So I'll turn it over to Yves.
Thank you, Daniela. So the question that I get asked the most about Vision 2030 Renewed and the process is like, what's new? like what's new, right? And there have been so much changes that have happened in the industry since when we started with Vision 2020 to now, right? Like we've seen the impact of climate change. We've experienced the real life results of the decisions that we've made in our day-to-day lives. Our governor has established an energy transition plan, which centers on affordability, decarbonization, environmental justice, and community engagement. We've received the expanded authority, and Justin and Daniela talked about how the expanded authority giving, NYPA sort of the rights, the expanded authority to build, own, and operate renewables has been sort of game-changing for NYPA. There's also been a significant amount of federal incentives around sort of essentially the federal government has said, hey, we're going to put our checkbooks behind this reinvestment and refocus on energy infrastructure. And then finally, we've actually gotten to see how we've performed in delivering Vision 2030. So our performance, all of these changes are the driving forces around why we had to renew our Vision 2030. All right, next slide, please. So the question about what has changed, we've maintained our strategic core, our vision of a thriving, resilient New York is still there. Our mission about leading the energy transition is still there. So what we have changed is our strategic priorities. Now we have 4 strategic priorities around driving the clean energy transformation. And what that really is like you think about the strategic priorities that Daniela has just walked through, there are 3 buckets. It's like we're on the right trajectory to hitting our goals, maintain. We've actually needed to expanded scope, expand. And then finally, they said maybe there's market dynamics that have changed so much that we need to tweak in order to accelerate our progress going forward. So with driving the clean energy transition, we've expanded. We've got preserve the value of hydro, decarbonize our natural gas, and the expanded authority into a priority that focuses on emissions-free generation. With transmission, that's a maintain. We're right now on target to hit our goals that we set out. And therefore, we're investing 200 to 400 million annually in our transmission asset base. With enabling our customers, we're also expanding. We're also expanding beyond partnering with our customers to enabling our customers for their decarbonization goals. Now, what does that really mean? It means offering them clean energy choices. It means following the leaderships in the expanded authority around our decarbonization leadership program to offer comprehensive decarbonization support for our customers and positioning NYPA as our trusted energy advisors. Now, finally, the last core business, revitalizing the New York State canal system. We have maintaining and improving our canal infrastructure. Now, and how are we going to do that? We're going to have to secure resources, and we're also going to have to foster connection, enjoyment, and respect for our infrastructure. Next slide, please. We've also aligned our foundational pillar in order to support our strategic priorities. And what that means is, so instead of moving from the functional pieces of what we're doing to a more outcomes-focused approach. Let's start with our people, right? We're moving from resource alignment and to uplifting our people and values. So instead of sort of doing profile planning, we're actually focused on what we want, uplifting our people. We've also seen in the expanded authority, there's been requests for more engagement. So we have a foundational pillar around supporting the diverse needs of our communities. Building innovation is expanding on the work that we've already done in digitalization to look at all the different forms of innovation that's happening at NYPA in order to support our priorities that we've laid out. With sustainability, we've invested in reporting, we've seen our integrated report come. So the next step is putting sustainability into all of our operations. And what does that really mean? We've got 4 commitments. We're decarbonizing and adapting to climate change. We're doing resource management. We're enabling ecosystems and biodiversity. And then finally, we're working with our stakeholders. The last priority is strengthening our resilience for long-term viability, which is an extension of our previous priority around resilience. And what this means is looking at, essentially it's three things. It's improving our posture for the next attack, which we know will be happening. It's providing equipment and bolstering our personnel. And then finally, it's ensuring that our responses are mature with scenario planning. Next slide, please. So the second question that I get asked the most is, what's next? And what's next is more of what we've had before. We're gonna, I like the phrase that the chairman used earlier, all hands on deck, right? And you heard Justin talk about bringing the entire organization together to accomplish Vision 2030. So what's next is bringing our values to life. That's the implementation of the plan. It's continuing with our 9 work streams, the 4 core businesses plus the 5 foundational pillars, through a series of meetings in order to understand and improve the current plan. So we'll have a detailed plan around what we're doing in 2025, all the way to what we're doing in 2025 in order to ensure that we hit the outcomes of 2030. And then I'm open for questions.
I think what would be helpful, so this, again, is a discussion we'll have over the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, so that we can, finalize this in December from our standpoint. It would be helpful for me if you roll this back a couple, so you've captured here thematically, tactics and initiatives. It would be helpful to see what path we were on and what the new path is. Compare the original to the renewed, where we're doing more, where we're doing less, where we've abandoned, where we've added new. So we have better clarity around the pivot that's being made, and a little more detail on the before and after. Invest 200 to 400 million annually. Was that 50 to 100 before? Was that 800 to $1 billion? Have we added? Just so we can better understand the old versus the new. So I don't know where that is. If that's something that you can help us with or prepare and send us so that we can have a more substantive look at it and dialogue with you or Danielle or whomever on the before and after.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
I think you're definitely making sense. And I think the biggest change has been the expanded authority, which has provided us.
And we understand, that.
And then, so you see there's been a transition from the strategic priorities, the old ones, we had 5, like preserve the value of high. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. But just need more depth and more detail, more definition about, we're defining renewed. This is what it was and this is what it is. And how do I get from here to here? And what was my rationale for the changes and the decisions that have been made? I said, is it a pivot? Is it a whole new direction? Is it faster? Is it slower? So if we can just look at the key initiatives, key tactics, in some reasonable depth, so we have a better sense of that.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we don't have confusion over, well, I didn't realize we weren't doing that anymore. I didn't realize that it becomes such a priority. As we're making this transition, I want to make sure we've got good clarity. All right,
that makes sense?
Make sense? Justin, you okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, so a little bit of before and after or something. Does that work for you guys?
No, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think that makes a lot of sense. And also when you build that in, when you build the chairman's suggestion in, sort of before, after, also you can touch upon the capabilities that NYPA has developed or has put in place, or which I know tremendous capabilities, and we can see some here over the last year since we got disbanded authorities to position NYPA to succeed on this strategic plan. So I would just add those what capabilities before, after, and the capabilities that we've developed and maybe need
Or need
additional-
more of,
or need
whatever, what
more of.
resources. Part of this, this is a 5-year, continuing execution here. So renewables is a subset. This is the bigger picture. Renewables is a piece of this. So just, what else, we need. So
Okay. Got it.
we're more informed. And we can react a bit more to the why and why not. Some of that conversation, because I think that's what's important for us to have with you guys over the next couple months. At a minimum, to educate and inform us, and two, have a good constructive dialogue with
Okay.
you.
Understood. Yeah, it was a great idea.
All right. Other thoughts, comments for Daniela, Yves? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next steps there, you're gonna give us some more, you'll coordinate discussions, sessions with each of us. So we have the opportunity, you'll ask us to meet, there'll be some coordination here.
Yeah, Yves is working on a plan, path forward to
Outreach, connection.
continue to engage as we.
So that gets structured, so it doesn't get away from us with everything else, going on.
Exactly.
Renewables, obviously critical, running dialogue there. We got a work stream around that. Bigger picture strategy, we got a work stream around that. We're gonna bring that to closure in December. Renewables, we're bringing to relative closure, in terms of formal approval in January. We got all this sequence so that all of us are appropriately working this in the interim.
Sounds good. We'll come back to you with a proposed schedule of outreach over the next 6 weeks.
Okay,
that
yeah,
we-
the next
so that-
60, 90 day kind of plan.
So that
where
we're
all
ready
this
to come
is
back
layered in.
and have this all nailed down by our next meeting in December.
And calendars can get aligned and outreach, and all the rest of that. Everybody's got an opportunity. Okay,
Good.
all right. Obviously, Adam's excited to come up next and bring us up to speed. You missed my,
I'm always early.
yeah, it's good. It's always
I came
good.
an hour before I was planned to speak, so I figured I was pretty early.
While you were stuck in traffic, I gave you and the team kudos on outstanding execution on the bond offering. I know you're gonna touch on that as well as the continued fine financial performance, but appreciate your prompt arrival at the podium. Because per Karen's calendar, we're supposed to be done with this meeting, I think, by now. So anyway, the podium is yours.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, trustees, NYPA colleagues, members of the public. So we'll just recap of where we are during the year. We spoke more extensively about this at the Finance Committee, so I'll just summarize a little bit where we are. Through August, we're ahead of plan. The themes are really around the fact that despite prices have gone lower than were originally anticipated, we continue to outperform from our generating assets based on higher levels of production, better water flow and throughput. And our hedging has offset the impact of the lower prices. So the combination of those things have put us in a position of being ahead on the revenue side from generation. Transmissions ahead, primarily based on some of the filings that we did that we weren't sure about would be approved when we did the budget, has had a positive impact as well. As we go through this annual true-up process also, we don't know how that's going to work out for the next transmission rate year until we finalize the actuals for the prior year. So those are the themes in terms on the revenue side. Expenses continue to track towards budget. No major surprises there. Every now and then we have these unplanned either outages or things that need to be addressed at the plants or the sites for emergent work. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, our pension expense came in higher than what was expected because of changes that were made by the legislature to the Tier 6 people who are in that pension plan. As we go, and also interest income exceeded year-to-date targets by the fact that interest rates had stayed higher for longer than was originally anticipated. As we go to the next slide for the year end, again, the themes all carry. We expect to remain above target. We see very little risk to the downside. Possible may go slightly ahead, but nothing significant right now. But again, the themes all carry as we move into the year, and we're actually going through the budget planning cycle now for 25 and for the 4-year plan, and I'll outline the timeline for that in later slides. Any questions on this so far?
Any surprises? I mean, you've come into the year very mindful and planful to your budget. You're almost spot on where you have benefits or on the generation revenue. Do you think that'll continue from your 8-4 plan to the end of the year? How do you feel about that?
Yes, so I think it will continue. We just had, well, we didn't have time to get it into the CSO for this report. We just closed on September, but September also was a solid month for us. And so all signs point to be more of the same. We're well ahead where we should be, and that's a good thing. And because of our hedges, there's very little downside for the rest of 24, and we continue to put hedges on for 25.
Thank you.
Okay,
Anything else? Okay, so next we do is an update on the bond transaction. So yes, we were very pleased with the execution. I'll make a couple of observations. Along the talk that happened this morning about how we're perceived with our customers, with the communities, the public. This is a result of how we're perceived by investors and the market, and how our name is in the financial markets when we do come to market. And it's been very well received. Having 2 upgrades to AA+ was certainly a big positive going into the sale. Not only does it help the NYPA general bonds, but our transmission bonds were also upgraded. So those were in the, I would say, an A+ category. Now they're at solid AA- territory. So they're always a little bit a notch behind. So it's sort of, all boats rise with the high tide. So we get that as well. So when I say they voted, the investors voted, they put in $2 billion of orders for $450 million of bonds. We were 5 times oversubscribed. The way it works was that what we do is we allow retail investors to only put in orders on the first day. And then that sort of sets a tone. And then we ensure that there you can get a share regardless of what happens the next day. The next day we're able to go in, and because of the overwhelming demand, we're able to go back out and reprice lower and get a better price. I mean, you talk about basis points. Each basis point's worth about $400,000 over the entire time. So every basis point does count. So we did have a really good result. There, we were able to get the 356, which is a low rate for us. I'll give it some perspective on the next slides. But also the way we structured the bond, we had taken out the high cost taxable bonds and replaced it with what you see there is the light blue. And that also provides some additional capacity for us as we look for other things we may have to be doing in the future. So it gives us a lot of room, a lot of runway, some capacity to do more down the road, and it positions us well for the various things we need to do. Other notable things is that just the timing of it. As we know, we don't try to time the market, but that being said, nobody really wanted to be in too close or before when the Fed had their meeting. That's when we had the finance committee meeting. We also talked about, and again, thank you, trustees, for approving the special board meeting approval for the bond. So we had the flexibility to hit the market when we needed to. Just a case in point, if we had waited till today until getting that approval, 2 big examples. One is the heightened geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. It's creating lots of volatility. And Friday, which was, it's good news for the economy, but it's not always good news for the bond market. They were expecting around 140,000 new jobs, for the month of September. That turned into 254,000 new jobs, completely blowing it out the water. Revision of the prior few months as well up. So the concern had been that, the Fed was too late or slow to start cutting rates, and that we were heading into recession, job growth was slowing. So there was a lot of expectation that they would get more aggressive between now and the end of the year. Based on Friday's report, there was a bond sell-off. So where we sit today, we probably would have been, maybe 10 or more basis points higher or $4 million more expensive. So, you know, just having that flexibility or avoiding big dates like that when they come out with that news it was critical for us getting maximum success. The next chart, please. So to also put in perspective how we did, you know, everything is relative, right? So how did we do compared to everybody else? So if we look at, you know, we'll consider our, you know, a good comparators, we had the city of New York, the state of New York, all highly rated, state of New York, you know, AAA with 2 agencies, AA plus with 1. We went basically within 2 days of each other. So we ended up pricing in 43 basis points below where the state was able to finance. And we also get additional benefit of what we call a positive arbitrage. And what does that mean? Is that because we're still in this inverted yield curve environment where the shorter rates are higher than some of the longer rates. So what happens there is that, you know, if we're borrowing at 356, but yet we're investing our money in treasuries or mortgage-backed securities at 4.5%, right? We're making 1% while we spend the money down. So that comes out to another $5 million to help lower the overall cost. So it's one of those unique things that we have in this kind of crazy market we're in, but we take advantage of all those things that we have available to us. But, you know, just on a relative basis, you know, we really, you know, outdid some of these others. And a lot of that has to do with, you know, the way the name is perceived in the marketplace. They see us as being a solid operator, that we execute on the plans that we say we're going to do, because we have this track record. We've been coming in on schedule, on budget, major projects. That's very key consideration. And, you know, that there's a lot of confidence in what we do, and we provide what they believe is to be an essential service, something that people can't do without. So all those factors, you know, really, so it's a good, to me, it's a good reflection of what the outside world in that arena thinks of NYPA. So it's a credit to all the people here at NYPA who've made all of this, that success, and allows us to present NYPA in the way that we do. Any other questions on that?
I can't, you know, do anything but underscore that. It's, while this is a finance discussion and finance team deserves real kudos for the execution, this is a credit to the entire organization. Can only underscore everything. The market rewards, you know, predictability, reliability, consistency. This is all a reflection of the confidence the market has in you and the entire organization being able to deliver on the promise. You know, say what you do what you say. So yeah, it's a kudos to everyone and a real cause for celebration, and obviously enables us to do everything we've been talking about this morning. This is key and critical. All this fits together. So
thank you.
Real cause for celebration and a real credit for everyone. No
Great
question.
team effort.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's important to note it kind of extra that the steps you've taken, led us through, helped us understand, put us in a better position to do what vanilla is, you know, and the next step. And it's, I want to make sure people understand that the steps you've taken and where we are with our finances helps us do what we got to do next. And that's a reflection, again, as John said, of incredibly hard work on everybody's part. For being proactive and seeing where we got to go and putting the steps in to get there. It's,
and we have more of
kudos to
that,
you.
right? We have more of that to do and more to come.
Sure,
But with this, so one of the things, to your point, Trustee Morris, one of the reasons, you know, was cited for the upgrade of the general obligation bonds was how we've diversified our credit by having the SFP bonds and seeing what we're doing with the others, so that they can identify what debt is being issued for what activities and how's it getting paid for. And the more we can sort of bucketize that, if you will, it gives everybody a clearer picture of what it is that they're looking to finance and our ability to make the repayments that are required.
right.
Yeah,
The projects that we're going to do.
Right, and protect, you know, the core of NYPA, right?
Right,
Because
absolutely.
first and foremost, you know, we have to maintain those core assets, our hydro assets, our other major facilities. State of good repair is first and foremost.
Yes.
So if everybody wants to make sure that we take care of the blocking and tackling before we do the extra stuff, and always, make sure that's taken care of, and then we can do everything else. So all of this helps explain the story. So that's
Yes,
great.
absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then just in terms of historical context, right, we're never going to get the lowest point in the market because we can't time the market, but just, in terms of where we are here today, you look going back, I would say 70% or more of the time, we've been in a higher rate environment. So, again, we can't always pick when, right? We can't wait for those, and we really don't even want to be down there, because at that low point, it was because there were bad things going on in the economy, right? So, you don't really want to always be there, because it means something else is going on that's not so good. But yeah, just in terms of historical perspective. So any other questions on that? I'll move on. Just in terms of upcoming schedule of things to happen between now and next year. One of the things that we are required to do under statute is on our preference rate customers. They are on a cost of service. So they are supposed to pay no more than what is deemed to be the cost of service, and no less either. So we're supposed to make sure that we're doing that, because otherwise, somebody else's would end up paying, more than they should, et cetera. As was said before, they are low cost customers. There hasn't been a rate increase since 2014. And at their rate, say it's a $12.50 per megawatt hour today, the market's in the 30s somewhere. So they're paying, 1/3 of wherever the market is. But, we've, in terms of that engagement, when it comes to the munis and the co-ops, neighboring states and other customers in that preference rate bucket, Maribel and her team has done a great job working with our people and doing a lot of outreach, a lot of sitting down. There's been a lot of dialogue and questions about, they look at every one of our costs to see, why are you spending money on this? Why are we paying for that? So there's a lot of scrutiny over what we're spending our money on, very detailed level questions. But the most important thing is they know the value of our hydro assets. They know that we're a lower cost provider with a lot of stability, predictability, and they understand that we have to spend $1.1 billion on Next Gen Niagara to make sure that asset keeps going. So they are in recognition of the fact that there's going to be the need to, true up and get to where they are. So we track where our actual costs are towards where they're paying based on, and that gets accumulated in a rate stabilization reserve, or so that we, account for what that number is, and then that gets trued up when we go into eventually the next rate cycle. So we've gotten to that point where we've hit the number that says in our agreements that we will now talk about setting that. So there's a whole long process. So culminate, next June for you to, decide on those rates. But between now and then, we'll file a notice of proposed rulemaking, and there'll be more input and engagement, and we'll discuss where the rates were going and how we get there. So we've been a lot of discussion on that, and we'll have further briefings with you as we go in terms of what that is looking like. Any other questions on that?
Adam, I'm seeing in that chart that you're already engaging in stakeholder meetings.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've been sitting with them quite extensively and giving them a lot of different options, that this is what it's going to look like. I mean, one of the things just to preview is that, if we were just to go to what they need to be to become compliant, it would be a big jump in 1 year, and we want to avoid any rate shock. So one of the things we are talking with them about is, maybe we phase this in over, say 3 or 4 years, something like that, that can get them to, to the right place, so that there's no, we minimize some rate shock.
Right.
If
So,
there
and
would
you're
be
doing
any.
it before the NOPR, I guess.
Yes.
So that you've had that
Yeah,
opportunity to engage them before you come up with that.
Exactly. And we expect a lot more give and take. Like I said, they've filed a lot of questions. They've gone through all of our numbers. We're explaining and getting back to them, just so that they have consultants, they have lawyers, so they just, they have the, people like Trustee Wheelock that are make their business out of, looking at every dime and challenging the rate. So, we are going through that process right now. Yep. Next slide. Just in terms of the upcoming budget. So we're going through, finalizing our numbers now. At the end of September, we had a snapshot date. So we sort of froze things at that point and started to build those projections in next year. So we're putting all the pieces of the plan together, various departmental budgets, different priorities, going through capital and other things of that nature. So putting all that together, we'll have, the final review, with Justin during October, and then we will start before we get to the preliminary finance committee. We'll have the trustee briefings available to go through in more detail, the various projects, the different components, where things are going. And there will be a preliminary budget that will be out for, discussion, comment. And between that and the final meeting in December, we'll approve the final plan. But I'm hoping, it's my goal to sort of, at least directionally and, sort of bottom line numbers, have some good solid indications by the preliminary, so that they might be tweaking in between, but at least people have a good sense of where we're going directionally.
Just to reinforce the earlier discussion, we've got a busy next 2-3 months here. So let's, work kind of a collective project plan between renewables, overall strategy, budget, all the rest of that. So we've got good timelines and measurables. We all understand what's needed by when. We get things calendar, because other than a finance meeting, we won't be back together. So a lot of this is offline, one-on-one interaction. So we're just gonna have to make sure we got all of this choreographed and coordinated. Busy time of the year is just a little busier as a result of this.
Maybe
we
we'll
can
do
talk about it afterwards.
Yeah,
but-
maybe we'll do is just put it on one kind of spreadsheet
Yeah,
or
so a big
schedule, so you can
project
see how
plan.
everything kind of relates to each,
Yeah.
to one another.
Yeah, so we've all got it. And,
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Great job again,
Thank you. Sure,
Adam,
thank you.
on all of that. And
We'll spread it to the team.
well done. Okay. All right, Joe, you're up next. Operations and to include canals. So catch us up on the world of power.
Thank you, Chairman.
G
can go
and
right to
T,
the next
G
slide,
and
guys.
T, right?
Yeah, I can go right to the next slide. Got it.
Our core business.
So thank you, Chairman, trustees, the members of the public that are here and remotely, and of course the staff. Thank you for supporting this. So so I like to say a lot of times when I get up here, and we generate and transmit electricity and operate 524 miles of navigable water. So I'll just do this first slide is really just going to be a kind of a flyby, and I'll focus in a couple areas. But you'll see that what we're doing now is reporting in categories in the way that Vision 2030 Renewed looks. That's what we're trying to do. And actually, if you look at my organizational changes that were announced a little while ago, that alignment is there as well. So you can see, generation would be Brian Sayeds, transmission would be Sal Rojas, customer solutions, of course, Maribel Cruz, and Canal with Rebecca, and then Trish Lombardi and Brad Van Auken have responsibilities for all the enterprise-wide functions across all of that, including project delivery and so forth. But just a couple of these quick highlights, because a lot of them were already spoken to and with the other presentations. We are going through some annual FERC and dam inspections right now. This is a new risk-based approach that FERC is having us go through. They like to use us first a lot of times because we're one of the agencies that will support their kind of innovative looking at risk approach on dam safety. We just started this. We just did Jarvis, and we're on our way up to Messina right now. I guess today they're actually in Messina doing these inspections, so we'll see what comes of that. The other projects that are going in through the queue are just a testament to the systems planning group and the work that we do to support the tranche of work with these clusters with New York ISO to evaluate interconnections to our system. And we'll continue to support that work as well. And then I think Trustee Warren, to your point about the way we execute, we also are never satisfied. So we are doing a safety perception survey. Dennis looks like he stepped away, but from a labor perspective, we did also engage labor in this process. DSS Plus actually is a spinoff of something that might be more familiar to people in the industry, which is the DuPont safety system. That's just a way that a lot of companies can, it's almost like a rubric that most companies can compare themselves to each other. So it's a traditional way they've been doing it for over the years. They've spun off. We asked them to come in and engage our folks. Got some very good candor, some feedback on the way we're approaching safety. And we're going to take those recommendations and move forward in the coming days and years.
Good candor mean?
Criticism on some culture, some of the things that we're doing maybe at the first line level. Like we don't always have visibility. Our record is good. Our numbers are good. So we see that. But are we more good or more lucky than good in some areas? So a lot of the candor that was coming back is really around the way we operate at the ground level. So first line supervisors, how they're doing things, the superintendents, and working directly with labor. So one example might be, is quick execution the safest way to do things? And are we rewarding the quickness or the safety if we have to slow things down to do it right? Balancing all that out. So that's kind of the real honest conversation we were having, and people were able to respond to that. So we're going to do some additional training and listening tours on that as well. In transmission, we had a drill over the last summer where we actually moved to our secondary energy control center. So that's the liaison with our New York ISO, that system reliability that we deal with there. So we actually operated out of there for about, I think it was about 8 weeks. We were there for a couple of months. Actually had an opportunity to visit the folks there. That all went very well. Everything's switched over nicely, and we're still working on that. Springbrook, I'll touch on another slide coming up. And the agreement with New York City DEP and structural impacts of this line we call RFK 305, which crosses the Hudson. There's actually a aqueduct that's used for the drinking water in New York City that's being relocated. So we're working with the DEP right now in New York City because there's some structural impacts of unwatering, dewatering that for those transmission assets. So we're putting some protections in place for that right now, working with them. The Chippy folks, TDI, which was putting Champlain Hudson Power Express into Lake Champlain. We have a line, it's called PV20, that goes from New York to, so figured, east and west, New York to Vermont. They're going north to south. It has to cross, in the lake. So we've been working very closely with them on the technical aspects of that and making sure that nothing's at risk there as well. Customer solutions, a lot of this was touched on, but I just wanted to reiterate that first item because I think there's a number of different ways our customers could satisfy their needs to decarbonize. A lot of it is large scale renewables. That's going to create a number of opportunities, but there's also DER services. There's other advisory services. And what Maribel's group's been really good about doing is right sizing it and listening to them and trying to figure out what's the best way for them to decarbonize their fleets. It might be a little bit on something behind the meter versus something that's more of a PPA for in front of the meter. We talked about some of the engagement with customers on our rates, and got a little kudos for Evolve through Public Utilities Fortnightly, top innovators for the electrification of the MTA bus garage. So if you haven't had an opportunity to see that, we'd love for you to see that as well. It's a very cool project. I am going to defer the Canal Corporation stuff because Rebecca and David will come up and talk about that, but we can go to the next slide, please.
There's a real acronym slide there. The Chippy.
I tried
that was a new one.
Chippy.
Chippy.
And I'm sure that's official.
Chippy, it's a new one. We got DSSs in there, Chippy. We got some. Yeah, check those out when you get home, okay? You send a note around to all of us. Okay. All right.
We'll put a chart together for you. It'll go on the spreadsheet that Justin talking about. I want to talk a little bit in generation. Again, we do everything, that's really executing the day-to-day operations, the facilities. What you may or may not have heard is that we did have an actual stator failure. The stator is the fixed part of a generator, and the rotor is the rotating part that goes inside of it. That's a 254 ton piece of equipment that failed at Niagara. So what happens there is if there's a short circuit, it creates a high heat, very high energy fault, which creates a number of different, it produces all kinds of toxins and things like that in the local area. So it could be lead, it could be asbestos, could be different things in that area. So that piece of equipment did fail. We have 13 generators at the Robert Moses plant. At any given time, we need about 11 to make sure that we can meet our obligations for the New York ISO. When this unit tripped out with this fault, it tripped an adjacent unit. This was unit 2. The Robert Moses unit 3 also tripped out. We are literally just getting, those happened in August 13th. We are literally just getting into the root causes right now. We have it torn apart. We're taking a look at it. And we're finding out, yeah, it was in fact a stator failure. It's pretty obvious from some of the more recent pictures that were not available prior to the presenting the board materials here. And unit 3 is back in service, but we are now going to be taking this unit apart, investigating what happened here and putting it back together as soon as possible, because we have a regular routine outage schedule that we have to maintain as well. Just a stark reminder that day to day, anything can happen and we have to make sure we're staying on top of it. So that was at Niagara. Next slide, please. Here's actually kind of a good news story, but it wasn't equipment that was trending toward failure. This is what we call the Sprainbrook a reactor. So what a reactor does is it actually controls voltage to maintain when there's changes in the loads or in the system on long transmission lines and in urban areas. A lot of the trustees may remember Y-49, very critical line that we have that again goes from Westchester County all the way down into Long Island. That line, this piece of equipment is basically a large transformer. So it's a big tank of oil with the coil in it. And the way they diagnose what's going on in real time is they can look at that oil and see what other elements are being produced based on heating, arcing, and things like that. What we discovered during our basically our ISOC here in White Plains is that this was acting a little bit weird, and we were able to take it out of service and find out that yes, in fact, it was going to imminent failure, which would have been more catastrophic, more costly to repair if that happened, because it would create all kinds of damage to adjacent equipment and more significant damage to the reactor itself. We were able to take it out of service and put it replacement in, and now we're going to do a repair on this. I want to bring it up because the board's been always very good to us about helping us support our digitization and the ISOC. And we presented this to Justin about a week or two ago. And we have the numbers that we'll present to you in the future on the avoided costs that ISOC has done. This would have been in the millions. We're definitely in the tens of millions, probably approaching close to $100 million of avoided costs that the ISOC has saved for us. So just wanted to bring that to your attention that that worked. It's an equipment failure. That's kind of a expected thing that we can happen, but we were able to get ahead of it because of the ISOC.
No, it's great. It's a great story.
Next slide, please.
And
Oh, sorry, go
Joe,
ahead.
just so,
Yeah, sure.
we understand it. So when you go back and digitize these sites or these large transformers, so are you adding digitalization sensors into the equipment? Is that what you're doing?
Years ago, what we did is we took the opportunity. There's a couple of different things that we did. One is we built the ISOC itself, so the analytic capabilities around that, but we had to get information back. So we did an aggressive sensor deployment at all of our fleets. So the generation fleets, starting with the generation fleet, but also the transmission fleets, to bring data into there. And we built a familiar term you might hear for some funding requests is on the comms backbone. That's what that's for, is to get all that information back here so that the subject matter experts can take a look at it. So yeah, we did an aggressive sensor deployment, comms backbone that's tied to the ISOC that creates this.
And Joe, just quantify that. I think somewhere roughly around 150,000 sensors.
Yeah, way over 100,000 sensors that we put in across the fleet. And the comms backbone is basically, if you figure those circuit miles that Justin talks about, we're putting that a fiber optic cable or microwave links where we can't do that with redundancy across the entire fleet. So thousands of miles.
That is a great success.
Next slide, please. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is just a high level. We're going to talk a little bit more specifically about how the customer solutions team is supporting the DL15 and some of the work at Empire State Plaza in subsequent slides. But just wanted to demonstrate here kind of the track record they have of all the number of projects that we've had historically in that group. And as I was reading this slide and the different services that we provide, as I was preparing for this meeting, it occurs to me that when I look on the right-hand side there, since the 1990s, that 300 million plus or minus in new investments annually, that pipeline is full. I think this year there's what, about 700 or 800 added into the pipeline, Maribel? $1 million, almost $1 billion added into the pipeline of this project. So incredible, successful work by Maribel and her team. But just a reminder of the different kinds of things that we work on, from the street lighting to solar, EV fleet, electric vehicle fleet infrastructure, and so forth. So just wanted to point that out, but I'll get into a little more detail in the subsequent slides on some of the projects they're working on in DL50 as well. Next slide, please. So DL15, that was part of the enabling legislation that we received as well. What it was designed to do is take 15 of the top emitters in the state and create master plans for these 15 facilities. There's 5 agencies and authorities that compose of the 15 different facilities that we're talking about. SUNY is obviously a big one that we're doing. And to the credit of these agencies and authorities is that they actually had a lot of plans in place. They had a lot of ideas and some facilities people who were very interested in doing this. So we were able to leverage some of that good work in our relationship that Maribel and her team have created over the years to support and enhance what they're doing and put it into the rubric of what DL15 is, which is trying to decarbonize all these facilities aggressively. So these are and we're also not just, I don't want anybody to think that we've drawn a box around these 15. If there are other ideas for other facilities they have, we're going to do that in terms of reporting on what this initiative it is, the 15. But we're always work with these customers and all their assets all the time. So
This is just the 80-20 rule.
correct, right? These are the big sweeping moves that we're going to have, right?
You impact these, you're having real
We're a
impact.
real impact on them, right? So one is our Office of General Services, and you see the Empire State Plaza there in the Harriman campus. I want to focus on the Empire State Plaza on the next slide, please. So this is one we had some questions about. So I think we'll have some questions. I brought my ringers, Maribel and Brian McCoy, back in the corner there to help us with this. But Empire State Plaza is really the capital area. So that's a major campus that has really 11 buildings, about 12 million square feet of building space that people think of as the Empire State Plaza. There are another 3 buildings that are adjacent to it, the Education Building, the A. Smith Building, and the Capitol Building itself that are also included in this. But there are ancillary buildings in Sheridan Avenue and some part of the thermal infrastructure of energy that are outside of that we all think of in terms of the energy people, the subject matter experts like Brian McCoy and Maribel's team think of it as all. So there's really 17 total buildings that we think of in there, everything from parking garages to these central air systems. And so back in 2017, we had a project proposal that was unsuccessful that created this Empire State Plaza plan, this master plan. What I wanted to just point out is that we have with the DL15 plan is rather than starting all over, we're leveraging these 2 plans almost like a Venn diagram. There are things that are included in the DL15 reporting that are not necessarily in this Empire State plan and vice versa. But most of what we're doing, we're leveraging those 2 plans together to aggressively decarbonize this entire campus. So what that'll mean, they have, getting electric chillers in there, tons of street lighting, other HVAC, but really that steam system is really probably the biggest nut that we'd like to crack in terms of trying to make sure they're being not only creating a situation where the carbon is being reduced, but other emissions in the area are being addressed for the communities there as well. So there have been a number of different outreaches with the local communities to OGS has been on point for a lot of that discussion. We have been right side by side with them, over a dozen, I think, Brian, right? Meetings that we've had with external stakeholders to make sure that we're including all different ideas from them as well. So the current portfolio is greater than $70 million in construction. $100 million are still in design. And the master planning efforts are moving forward and to hopefully a good conclusion. But I just wanted to make sure, I know this comes up a lot, the Empire State Plaza, that everybody has an idea of what we're talking about when we are talking about it. When we say Empire State Plaza, we mean everything. We mean the entire infrastructure. So just a quick
Second
highlight.
highest state energy use. So curious, what's the first?
It's in the SUNY system, I think, right?
Oh, it is? Okay. Got it. Questions for Joe?
Yeah, and we have the canals, but I would bring up before we bring up
Yeah,
Rebecca and
we're
David.
gonna take a
will-
break
Yeah,
before we bring up canals.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thank you. I know so many of these places have long histories and honestly sensitivity. In someone who lived in downtown Albany, we had people in our street who remembered when the plaza was built and communities were removed and, up came the plaza. Obviously, it's a complicated system and there's so much that goes to it. And trying to read the different plans and just kind of wrap my own head around it. Can you talk a little bit about the phases, the 4 phases for the project? I know there was a $100 million commitment from the governor recently. If you could talk about that piece. I think breaking it down a little bit will help my own brain try to understand what we're looking to do and when. And then, just would love to keep in touch because I think it's our capital.
I'm gonna bring up Brian for that piece because he's got them memorized. I have them written down, but he's got them memorized. So I'm gonna bring Ryan up to do that.
So there's 4 phases that we identified. The first phase, as you said, was $100 million, and that's effectively to decarbonize or electrify the existing chill plant.
Okay.
And we're moving forward with that. We're in design right now. Second phase is actually not being completed by us. That's actually relocating the existing health lab that's in the kind of the basement of the plaza over to the Harriman campus. That new facility is going to be fully electrified. And we're going to convert that existing space back to office space. So that has a pretty big impact. So those first 2 phases will achieve about 50% decarbonization. From there, it kind of gets a lot harder. The third phase is essentially converting the buildings to allow you to use a low carbon heat source such as geothermal or wastewater heat recovery. And that's kind of the other half of that phase, which is formulating a larger thermal energy network. And the final phase is kind of taking care of the peak. So that's the last like 10% of carbon use is going to be for like the coldest parts of the year. That would be replacing the peaking operation at the steam plant. And that's the point at which you could essentially shut down the steam plant. So right now we're working on that first phase and we're planning for kind of phases 3+ over the next year or so. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, thank you. And obviously there's many entities involved. So we have OGS as a partner, City of Albany also being looped in and.
Yeah, so for the third phase, we need to find a source of that low carbon heat.
Yeah.
And we've identified 2 potential sources. One is parkland that the City of Albany owns and operates, and the other is a wastewater heat recovery, a wastewater plant that the County of Albany operate. So
Okay.
we need to meet with them. We've had some initial meetings, kind of conceptual meetings with them, but we need to get into the much more detailed planning with them over the next year to really determine which or perhaps both sources we can use for the plaza, as we go forward.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And again, like every community, there's a lot happening. We just had a influx in funds from the federal government to do a big Beaver Creek project with DEC and the feds. Lincoln Park has been completely, dug up and a new pool is going in, and that's right behind the plaza. So there might be a way to even just stack all the projects together, hopefully.
Absolutely. And we'd like to have kind of that larger discussion with the city and county as we move forward. And we're preparing to do that over the next few months, like I said. So.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think for the community, it's so important that we have these conversations. And, I'd love to keep in touch. I think my fellow trustee had maybe a question about a tour.
Yeah, no,
potentially.
just for us to get there's so much great engineering and innovation going into this. As the chairman said, it's the second highest energy use facility in the state. It would be nice, at least for me, to walk it at one.
I love to give tours of the
Yeah.
work we've
You wanna do it,
completed
Mike?
and the work we expect to
go.
complete along with the infrastructure. It is fascinating. You can kind of see the schematic of the different plants that serve it.
Yeah.
It is a really interesting tour, so I'd be happy to facilitate that.
Is any of the work that we're doing connected with any of the alternative energy resource? Do we have any segueing, any joinder, anything
So-
like that?
The plaza is a little unique. It is in an urban location.
Right.
We have looked at the possibility of using solar, but for various reasons, we haven't been very successful with that. So
Okay.
we'll continue to do so. We have to evaluate that as part of the DL15. But again, I've been working at the plaza for 15 years and there's been several opportunities, but it's just a challenging location to put solar and just again, because of the location, the age of the building, configuration, of the building, that sort of thing.
But you're talking through the process of alternative energy
Sure.
to get the steam plant out of there and, okay.
Absolutely. At some level, geothermal or wastewater heat recovery kind of is alternative energy, right?
Yep,
So that's
sure.
that's really what the steam plant provides is thermal energy. So that's what we need to find a way to offset.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Last question, the capital itself,
Yes.
is that included? Is it part of a different phase?
It's part of the overall district energy system. So that is kind of included in that third phase where we're going to convert the entire district energy system to use the low temperature. So that is already included, but we are doing further, more detailed study on that as part of the decarbonization leadership program. That's not part of kind of the core plaza. It's kind of part of the expanded utility network, but it will ultimately be included. Yes.
Okay, yeah, if there's any way to do some sort of just like breakdown, or if it's in the report, I apologize, of the different phases, I think it would be very helpful just for, again, to kind of track the different elements and pieces, just because it's such a massive project.
Absolutely. We can provide that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. Thanks, Joe.
That concludes my remarks as well. John, unless there's any other
Yeah,
questions on all that stuff?
Thanks, Joe. That's
Okay.
good. Thank you. To ensure we maintain focus for the stretch run here, we're gonna take a little 10-minute break, okay? The 10-minute break, we'll be back at 11:10, all right? And David and Rebecca will be up with Canals at that point. All right, we're back. Rebecca, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Good morning, members of the Board of Trustees, colleagues, members of the public that are with us today. Thank you for your time. My name is Rebecca Hughes. For anyone I don't know, I am the Executive Deputy Director of the Canal Corporation, and I'll just provide a few milestone updates this morning. Next slide, please. A few updates on our Reimagine the Canals initiative, a few key milestones that we struck since we last got together. Our iconic lighting program is one of our early interventions to reimagine the canals. We literally cast historic assets in new light, bringing community attention back to these pieces of their history and of their future. We've now lit a total of 5 structures, including the Fairport Lift Bridge, Lock 17 in Little Falls, our highest single lift on the canal system, lighthouses that bookend Oneida Lake, and now this final installation on the rail bridge connecting the city of Tonawanda with North Tonawanda, going over the Erie Canal. And this is really kind of an homage to the contribution of the Erie Canal in fostering economic development for those communities. So it's our 5th and final installation, this very dramatic counterweight on this rail bridge. In the upper corner, you can see a steel signing event in Brockport, New York. This is a pedestrian bridge that will connect the SUNY Brockport campus with downtown Brockport on the other side of the canal and the Empire State Trail. Connectivity being a theme as we think about, new development along the canal system. And this was a big milestone for us with the steel signing, the major structures, the superstructure being put in place. And we're still on pace to have a grand opening commensurate with the opening of the canal system in May of 2025, our bicentennial year.
The Brockport Bridge, all right.
Finally.
The Brockport Bridge goes on.
Super fans in the room. I love that. And then lastly, we've got an update on Guy Park Manor, a historic manor house that was damaged in storms in 2011. We had a very dramatic lifting of the manor house out of the floodplain. So it's now sitting 3 feet, 8 inches higher than it was during the time of damage. There's a lot of resilience measures built into this historic restoration, including moving the utilities up out of the lower levels into upper levels, and actually a design that allows water to flow under the building, accepting that extreme precipitation is part of our future, but also adapting to that so that we can preserve history while also being more resilient. Next slide, please. And I also just wanted to give kudos to the public engagement team, especially Elizabeth McAndrew, for work that she did to develop a campaign called More Voices. The concept is that history is often told as if it's from one single source and told in one specific way that represents the whole truth. And we know that there are so many more stories that have not been amplified throughout our history. So this brochure, More Voices, highlighting contributions of African Americans to the canal system, is the first in a series for us. And Liz recently received recognition for this campaign through the New York State Tourism Industry Association. So really a nod, from a seemingly unlikely source, but this brochure is designed so that when people come visit the Erie Canal on, historic tours and vacations, they're also thinking about that interrelatedness with the history of the Underground Railroad and the contribution that the canal made for freedom seekers that were looking for pathways to Canada and beyond. And we highlight not only abolitionists and people who aided freedom seekers, but also African Americans who built businesses along the canal, operated ships, operated industrial facilities, who contributed to their communities. So Peyton Harris, I highlighted here, not only ran a canal-oriented business, but also was one of the founding members of the Michigan Baptist Church, Michigan Street Baptist Church, which is now part of the Michigan Street Historic District in Buffalo, that really highlights the contributions of African Americans to the founding of that city. So just a couple of good news stories, in that realm, and I'll hand it over to Dave Mellon to dive into operations unless there's any questions.
Just ironically at the church a couple weeks ago for an event, just a revitalization in that corridor. It's great to see as well. So, all right, super, well done.
And we're working with the Michigan Street Alliance. That'll be one of the tours that we offer as part of our World Canals Conference event being held in Buffalo next year. So as people come from all over the globe to visit Buffalo, we're making sure it's not just about canal history, but what are all of these other, things that emerged during that same time period.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, trustees, NYPA colleagues, members of the public. So this morning, I have some highlights of the soon to be expired 2024 navigation season and also a look ahead to winter work and beyond.
Expired is such an
Soon to
ominous
be
term.
expired.
I mean, come on, it's sunny and bright out there, come on, expiration is a little heavy,
Okay.
so.
Fair enough.
Let's bring a little more energy to this, Dave. I mean, come on. You're expiring, I think, here on this. The team is expiring. Come on.
I hear you there.
Fire up.
Right out of the gate.
It's a cakewalk.
So the season is closing in 8 days. 8 days.
8 days.
October 16th. It's been 5 months is the navigation season. So next Wednesday is the official closing. There'll be some passage through commercial permits allowed after that, but now we're getting very close to the transition to our winter work program. So, okay, so I'll just kind of go through the system usage. I mean, for the most part, it was steady state this year. Recreational traffic on the canal through measuring our lockages was pretty much the same. It was down a little. We had Hurricane Debbie, and maybe that's a 5% reduction of lockages, something like that. The trail traffic from observation seems very similar to years past. Heavy foot traffic in urban areas, particularly on nice days. The new hours, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. seem to be working out well. Good feedback from the public and internal sources. So we plan to continue that next season. The number of unexpected closures. Now, if you look at our notice to mariners system on the website, you'll see that this lock and this lock are closed for some mechanical issue, for example. So the number of expected closures was similar to last year. But we have a refreshed inspection program known as the fall inspection program. The closures that we experienced this year, although the number of closures was the same, the duration of the closure and pretty much the intensity of the issue, I'll call it, seemed to be less. And I do attribute it to an improved inspection program with a heavier focus on mechanical and electrical components. So system usage, commercial shipping, cargo carrying commercial vessels were up 57%. Non-cargo carrying were up 15%, but still, from an overall perspective, that represents about 1%.
I was just going to say, absolute numbers, they are still small,
Yeah, they're
right?
still very small. They're in the hundreds as opposed to recreational blockages are over 50,000, we'll say. Well, there were some notable shipments, Ralph Wilson Park Bridge, Brainstone, stone shipments on the Champlain, and also cable shipments supporting the Champlain Hudson Power Express project. We are working closely with that team, and we are going to extend passage at this point through November 8th to support that project. So some notable shipments. Hurricane Debbie, okay, that came at us and pretty much it was a non-event. how it missed us. However, we did end up pulling the movable dams in the Mohawk Valley and then putting them back a few days later, no small feat. I think the reason I included this on the agenda is because it really highlights the conservative posture that now has become the norm, and I think appropriately so, really demonstrates our commitment to public safety. You know, the continuing commitment there. So that's kind of how we roll these days, where if a storm is coming, we know that there's risk there. So we are on that, and kudos to the maintenance team and operational leadership. The movable dams are very big structures, as many of us know here, and it's a big effort, and they really make it look seamless. So
The bridge just got installed this weekend, very successfully, huge event. So great work. Kudos. Couldn't have done it without you guys. So great work.
good to hear. Staffing update, we remain at about 470 permanent positions, and the vacancy rate of 10% pretty much has been with us for some time. I think that's normal. That hasn't really changed much. On the seasonal front, the thing I'll say there is we were recently able to convert 35 seasonal employees into permanent employees, you know, lots of positive effects of that. And this summer, we're definitely seeing some super seasonal candidates who we're hoping to complete the remaining, I think there's 14 conversions this spring. So a lot of good candidates that are out there working for us this summer. And then I'll mention the training program continues to grow at Canals. I've mentioned title consolidation before, where we're basically increasing the array of duties that any Canal employee could be asked to perform. And as a result of that, the training needs increase. So we have 2 new program administrators coming on board, hopefully in the next few weeks, and they will be able to run with that program in a stronger way than our current resources allow. Employee engagement, broad understanding of our strategy and promoting an appreciation culture are the overall goals. Inside of 2 weeks, we plan to roll out a new employee recognition program at Canals. In terms of the strategy piece, maintaining improving infrastructure, securing resources and funding, and fostering connection and enjoyment to the canal system, those themes are being broadly and consistently communicated throughout the canal organization in a stronger way than they have been to date. So just trying to get everyone aligned, which ultimately affects the smaller choices that all employees make every day. Let's see, Utica section. This summer, we unfortunately had to deal with a rash of thefts in the June to August timeframe, 13 to 14 thefts. Just something we haven't really seen before. There's not really a history of this broadly across Canals. So we had 13 to 14 thefts that continued for some period of time, a sustained approach by some individuals. Our initial reaction was,
what are they stealing? What's the?
They're stealing brass components from vessels. They're stealing lawnmowers, pressure washers, generators, stuff like that. And so basically our initial reaction was, cameras and working with local authorities. And that resulted in an arrest. But then these things continued. Okay, and now over the past, say, 6 weeks, it's calmed down. Don't know exactly under the hood what's going on there, but it's calmed down at this point. But it really has opened our eyes. We're working very closely with crisis management and security folks at NYPA. You know, I think what we need here and where we're heading is a broader, systematic look at this, because the canal does have over 400 buildings, you know, in all kinds of places. Yes, a lot of them are on the canal, but many are in remote areas. So we are exposed to, significantly, I would say. However, there is no history of this. This is a kind of a, unique challenge that we faced this summer. But we seem to be through it now, and I think we're headed to a better place relative to a statewide assessment for this. Lastly, on emergent work, the thing to note here is that in terms of this year to date, less or no emergencies and more emergent work. So in other words, not enough time to wait to get a work need into the capital program, but not an emergency. So generally a good thing. Things like the Royalton cutoff wall, soil bentonite cutoff wall, some critical UDS cleanouts in the Utica area, and tree clearing at a variety of dams to facilitate inspections. So that's kind of looking back.
So big picture, how do you assess the season? It was an A season, a B season? What's your view in comparison to the last 7 years? What are we at this now, 7 years?
Yeah, I'd say it's an A+ season because
Terrific.
even though perhaps the users see a lot of the same under the hood, what's going on in terms of resilience and better maintenance, focused approach on risk. That's hard to see. We see it clearly every day, but that's why I say A+.
Oh, super. Congrats.
Okay, so next slide, please. So winter work and beyond. So, once again, this year, continuing systematic maintenance, these critical maintenance projects known as pump outs. With this winter, we have another 10 pump out projects planned. 5 of the 10 are continuing. The other 5 are new, and some of them, such as E14, O5, and CS1, those are actually 2-year projects. A lot of this work is performed in very harsh conditions. So there's definitely a safety focus, right out of the gate with us that we sustain throughout the winter period. Over the past few years, there really has been an uptick in terms of the visibility of what's going on these pump outs. So pump out tours, if you've heard that. So I just want to extend an invite to the board and to NYPA senior staff here that these pump out tours are available. Probably best to have someone reach out to Rebecca or myself, and we can get you in there if you so choose. And it's really interesting. These locks are huge, and it's really challenging environment in the winter. So welcome. Capital program. Now this one is a big one. This one to me, out of everything I'm saying here, this one really hits home in terms of where we're headed in terms of canal revitalization. So there's kind of 2 components. There's funding, and then there's funding or resources, I'll say, and then there's delivery. So on the funding and resources, we've got a couple things going on. We've got, first of all, in 2023, we formed the Canals Funding Working Group. Okay, so they are internal resources looking to obtain grants and other external funding. To date, they've secured $13 million, and there's currently another $10.3 million pending, and I think they've got 5 active applications. So kudos to Andy Marzo and his team and all the folks who are working hard on that. But that's really getting lathered up to bring in external funding. And then there's the division of budget. So last year we were able to secure $50 million, truly beneficial. This is still in the funding piece. We recently, October 1st, had a really great site visit with senior staff and division of budget. Rebecca, myself, Trustee Wheelock, operational leadership. Really, I think a good meeting, and the essence of it is that it's promoting the understanding of the need in a real honest way. So yeah, we saw the infrastructure in Amsterdam at Lock E11, but I just think continuing that effort will hopefully result, in additional funding there as well. So thank you, Rebecca, for really setting the stage on that entire meeting. So that's on the funding end. Now if we get the funds, now we have to deliver, and NYPA project management has really come into the picture and really starting to expand themselves to be ready to deliver additional projects that are beyond the capacity of canal staff. So Andrea Luongo, who's here today, Adam Jacoby, they are basically putting into place framework for project delivery that is in essence aligned with asset types. So for example, one asset type might be a dam program or an embankment program. And the idea is that we have resources and a prioritized approach to all the assets such that when the funding comes in, then we can puff up or enlarge the program to deliver very easily, seamlessly. Okay, so at this point, that effort is probably 40 to 50% stood up in terms of that framework. But that, if we get the money and we're not ready to deliver, that's a problem. So these 2 things kind of work together, and great work going on there. Let's see, and then lastly, on the innovation front, 2 areas, the inspection program and the water management system. And the way this fits into canal revitalization is that, the whole concept of revitalizing the canal, over time, whether it's, 2 decades or beyond, and billions of dollars and a state of delivery that we can't see right now, but that we'll see clearly in 15 years, for example. Okay, so because so much time is going on, the concept of monitoring and awareness is a concept that's, I think, critical to allowing us to be safe, have a safe environment for the public between now and the time we can actually repair the system. So we've been pushing monitoring and understanding risk and inspections. And so on the innovation front, I've said this before, that we conduct probably an overall about 800 inspections a year with licensed engineers, but we've been pushing technology to do it better and faster. So next week, we actually have a proof of concept exercise going on at the Madison Reservoir where, and I'm, excuse my lack of, there's terms here that, are better suited for IT folks and the folks who understand the equipment. But in essence, there's a large box, and in the box is a robotic dog, and there's also a drone. And from a remote location,
It's the dog house. The
the dog house, yeah, the
Dog's in the dog
dog's in the dog
with
house.
his drone.
There's a doggy door.
bone.
The
Dog and a
doggy
bone.
door is low and the drone roof is high.
Huh?
And so from a remote location, you can basically open up the roof and send the drone on a mission, and the drone gets photos, videos, and thermographic images that help us detect leaks and transmit it through the cloud back to the engineers. But that would replace a team of a couple engineers driving to the site a couple hours away in this kind of thing. Now the dog, once the drone determines a concern, the doggy door opens and the dog can go to the concern and get its camera or its nose within a few inches of the problem. So it's like this, it sounds so futuristic, but it's actually next week that this is
Right.
happening.
Right. I just want to know if we're using Fresh Pet. Do we order a Fresh Pet? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
But it's like in my head, it's like when we have these assets that are pose a significant risk because of the amount of water they contain or the communities nearby, that if we had assets like that there, where we had a much better and more frequent look, just like that to me starts to resemble what it might look like to inch us along in terms of risk management until we get things repaired.
If 7 years ago when we inherited the canal system, if someone said to me, John, in 2024, we're going to talk about
The dog house.
Yeah, the dog.
no, not going to happen. So yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a strong collaboration with NYPA staff on this as well.
We should do a public campaign to name the dog.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it has a name. It's I think it's Gizmo.
Gizmo's a pretty good name.
Yeah. In addition to that,
Have to
that
beat that.
story, it's a really neat story. We are actually now using real dogs on the canal to assess embankments mostly.
Is there water sniffing dogs?
There is. The dogs get trained on the water because the water, at least in the Western Erie, comes from Lake Erie, and that has a distinct smell. So you train the dogs on that water, and then they can walk a steep embankment that's got all kinds of trees and brush, and they can go right to the leak.
So that distinct smell is beneficial after all. We shouldn't be cleaning that up. The distinct smell is important.
Yeah. So, and then lastly on the innovation is the whole water management system and all the complexities. It's a hard system to understand. There's so many intersecting bodies of water and controls. And so we are working to create a more transparent look at what's going on with water management at canals. So a public facing element of it and an internal facing element of it. And you'll be able to go one-stop shopping and see what's going on with the water at canals, lake levels, pool levels, all the information, weather. And so this is completing system development is this year, review and test in first quarter next year, and then roll out in phases in the latter part of next year. So that's on the horizon. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to to answer.
Well, the highlight video for this season should be very interesting, Dave. I like this, you know. We'll have
We'll meet
Gizmo out there, we'll have all kinds of things. All kidding aside, very, very well done. Great kudos to you and the team. It's incredible, literally, the rise in play and caliber of execution here. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's really good to see the alignment of NYPA canal culture, right, coming together, both under around strategic issues. It's really, and risk, because those were gaps that we are finally closing. So it's really exciting to see.
Thank you.
All right, we have one last
Yep. So next slide.
vessel.
There you go.
Yep. So this is a proposal to name a new tugboat in honor of Thomas X. Grasso. Next slide. So a little bit of background. Previously, the board has approved the procurement of up to 4 tugboats. Subsequently, Blount Boats Incorporated in Warren, Rhode Island, started manufacturing 2 of the 4. Delivery is expected in May of 2025. The first tug will go to our Waterford section, and then the second one in September of 2025, which will go to our Utica section. Remaining 2 tugs to be delivered in 2027. So I am proposing that the naming of the first tug be the Thomas X. Grasso. Tom Grasso passed away in 2022. He was a highly respected canal advocate and Erie Canal expert by all accounts. Next slide, please. So just quickly highlighting some of Tom's contributions to New York State and the canals. Tom studied geology and paleontology at University of Buffalo at Cornell. He founded the Geosciences Department at Monroe Community College. He also served as the Canal Society of New York president for over 40 years. He served as the Inland Waterways International president for 8 years, and he was integral in restoring the Port Byron Erie Canal Heritage Park. Perhaps more importantly, he was a gentle and thoughtful person who cared deeply for people. I want to thank Trustee Gonzalez for your participation and support in getting it to this point in terms of a proposal. And Brian Stratton, our director, has spoken to Carola Grasso, Tom's widowed wife in Pittsford, New York. She is aware of this proposal, very touched, and will be part of any dedication in the future. So that is a proposal for the board to consider.
Tom was, when Tom walked into a room of folks that were affiliated with canals, you could feel the respect that they had for him just upon his entering the space. I got to meet him once, so I was very lucky to have that opportunity.
Do we have naming criteria and benchmarks? I'm not pushing back, but
We developed
there's
a policy.
sensitivities to
We do have a policy. that
what
we
bar
follow.
you have to clear to have naming rights.
Yes.
The policy states that there's 3 different categories for naming. So one is a person who made either significant contributions to the New York State Canal System or to the state of New York. We can also name tugboats after significant places along the canal system. So, the tug Syracuse is an example of that. And then we can also name tugs in honor of our values and principles. So words that evoke, what we stand for. So the tug urger is an example of that, where you can use, descriptive words. So the policy allows for those 3 categories. We don't specify, significant contribution, but I think, Tom definitely set the bar really high if he's the standard. And we did name a tugboat in 2022 or 3 in honor of Harriet Tubman for her contributions to New York State history and to humanity. So that's another example of one that's named in honor of a person.
I think that's when we developed the policy around the Tubman naming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in no position to evaluate Harriet Tubman versus Tom Grasso, but just want to ensure we've given due consideration, because one, we run out of tugboats and or, 2, just to avoid debate over the why him versus her, why not me, all the rest of that, as long as we've had good due process in coming forward with this.
We have, and I think management stands behind the recommendation as having followed the policy, and we'd be happy to share, how we got here, but yeah, we stand behind this recommendation.
All right, well, on that, why don't B make a motion to adopt the recommendation?
So moved. Motion made.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Second, third, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. So
Let us
congratulations
know when the dedication is.
to Tom's family and appreciate the consideration and great job, Dave. Well done. Okay. As the season expires, we appreciate the A+ grade. Nothing better than going out with an A+. So well done, Dave. And thank you, Rebecca, as always. So, all right, last of our formal presentations, Alexis, risk update.
Hello, trustees, colleagues, and the public. Having just had two densely packed back-to-back Risk and Resiliency Committee meetings with over an hour of content each, I'm going to keep it very brief today. I'm going to take us up to the 10,000 foot level and just talk about process. So just to level set, please keep in mind, risk is just uncertainty. Risks aren't static, they evolve, just as strategies need to evolve in light of changing conditions and progress. So risk and strategy are interconnected, and that's going to be the topic for today. As promised, I'm always going to keep it simple for you. 3 things to know. When it comes to risk management and the strategy refresh that has just been taking place, number 1, when we review our whole strategy end to end, we also need to holistically review our entire set of risks and risk profile. We look to understand the risks not just from the strategy, but of the strategy. To support this, risk team members were part of the core team for the strategy refresh that was led by Yves and his strategy organization. This allowed for very organic consideration of risk across all the priorities and all the foundational pillars, and then across them as well. Took away some business burden by integrating it into existing workshops and the work streams that were taking place along the way and will be continuing. Once the refresh strategy articulation and the updated commitments are in place, that then becomes the basis for our risk profile and our risk assessments going forward. So sort of the virtuous cycle that you see on here. Number 2, a strategy, of course, intends to achieve outcomes. When we have a shift in strategy, we may see shifts in risks versus reward during the implementation period, as well as the ongoing execution through the end of the strategy period. Our risk processes help in the sense that they are the mechanism through which we try to assess, monitor, manage, pivot as needed to maintain the intended risk-reward balance. So that's always the key driver behind why we have the risk processes in place and why we look at risks to actually achieving the outcomes of our vision, mission, and the priorities within our strategy statement. Number 3, I know I mentioned during the Risk and Resiliency Committee meeting that we're reviewing the risk appetite levels in light of Vision 2030 renewed to see if we need to make any adjustments. Now, given that we are renewing our strategy, not radically altering it, and that we have expanded authority, not dramatically divergent authority, I anticipate that most of our risk appetite levels will just be reaffirmed. I do believe there are some categories where we will see some modifications, and we will definitely take the time to pause and look at the entirety of the risk appetite statement, making no assumptions until we reviewed it with executive leadership, because those are our guardrails, and we want to make sure that we're setting them in the right place. Integrating Vision 2030 renewed is the focus of the risk, resiliency, and sustainability work streams going forward through the end of this calendar year, so that we're set up properly to take it forward and provide support across the organization through 2025 and beyond. I was going to say 2030, sorry. It's stuck in my head now. As promised, that is short and sweet. So let me just ask if the trustees have any questions or comments.
I think, going back to, the before and after strategy, I'd ask you to delineate, how our risk appetite on the assorted initiatives and tactics is, being evaluated. And we've had many conversations over the years about how we, being on the leading edge versus bleeding edge, and how, financially we like predictability and consistency, but we've got an obligation to get out the risk curve a little bit more in terms of what we do and how we do it. Obviously, renewables, the inherent risk in that is higher than we've traditionally undertaken. So make sure that we're leaning into the risk appetite. My expectation, I would expect to see it move up. And, there were, being disciplined in how we're evaluating all that, but we're willing to take, risks. So, yeah, how this weighs into the before and after, and how we're quantifying over these next few months here as we dialogue around this, let's make sure we're clear about that. And I don't mean that in a negative way. You know me, I enjoy risk. I enjoy taking risk. I enjoy, that's an obligation, responsibility we have. And it needs to be prudent and responsible, but yeah, let's make sure we're discussing and engaging around that enough, and it's clear and it's articulated in our dialogue and some of the materials that you give us on a specific basis, not global, but really a little more granular on all of that.
I think that's true. I think it'll be good to see how this all fits together. There are different work streams underway here, but they all do intersect, which is really the topic of your presentation here, is how it all comes together. But we should make sure the renewables and the
because to me, there's nothing wrong with the yellow. Everybody always feels good when the arrow's, in the green, but the yellow's fine. If you're there for the right reasons and you've got the right guardrails in place and, all the rest of that. So those are just the kind of things where collectively, do we want to be in the yellow? Now, well, that's a decision we make, but at least on some individual initiatives, tactics, yellow's to me the target zone. How far we push it, those are just things that we need to, I think, have good dialogue about.
Yeah, I think I would just add, and I'm sure Joe would agree, there are certain things here where we don't want to be yellow. We just, generation, transmission, canal infrastructure, we're not taking risks.
That allows us to take risk,
in other places.
That's what I'm saying. The stability, consistency, predictability, that's foundational, but that allows us, but that doesn't need to be, green doesn't need to be core value. We can't be risk averse. So.
Okay.
So make sure that you build enough of that into, we'll talk some more afterwards, but I think, how we navigate this and dialogue about it. So there's good transparency and clarity that we're comfortable we're taking enough risk.
Yes.
As we lean into and push.
Understood.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes. And part of the reason why I did mention, Chairman, that some of the risk appetite categories might not change as much is because we have built some flex into them already. You'll see all the risk appetites, they're arranged on a specific number. And also, there are risk appetites set for each different type of risk category that we have. So that's the part that we're examining to make sure that we're setting them in places that are consistent with the intentions of our strategy going forward.
And I just thinking, the risk of, babbling. I mean, we're at a point where in some of the renewables and other key initiatives, the reward can be limited, minimal to limited, for us, because our job is to enable, our job is to facilitate, our job is to take de-risk opportunities for others so that they can lean into it. Those are the kind of things that, to me, we need to better understand and debate so that we're taking disproportionate risks so others can step in and invest. We can absorb the downside so others can raise capital and do other. Those are the kind of things that, I think we need to dialogue about to make sure that we understand, that dynamic, but that collectively, we're, leading in an appropriate fashion.
That's a good exercise for the organization too, internally as well.
So,
I agree.
Vanilla, I hear you, see you nodding. Is that in agreement or?
Yeah, I was just thinking, the yellow's fine is my favorite statement. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I get that not everybody wants to live there. Not everyone's comfortable. That's fine. You know, we need people that are comfortable with their feet firmly planted in the green. That's good. But yeah, yellow's where, you know, we need to play on a lot of these strategic initiatives, and we've got the balance sheet and organizational capacity to absorb some of that downside. Attrition, to me, that's also cool if we're gonna have misses.
Can't innovate if you're not
Yeah,
in the yellow.
exactly. Well, and if you're not missing, you're not swinging hard enough, you know, so that's what I want to make sure that, yeah, we have a good view and perspective on that and lens into that. Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, great.
Can I just add one other, as I think about, and the entire enterprise risk topic is super important for us as trustees from our fiduciary responsibilities. As we think about renewables in particular, do we benchmark ourselves against other big utilities, other big state utilities? I'm just curious, because as I think about risk, I always think about it from a corporate perspective, benchmarking against peer groups, and I'm just curious how you all think about it.
I think we, feel free to jump in, Vanilla, but I think we would benchmark against other developers, private sector developers, because that's essentially the business we're in. That's who we're competing with. So yeah, that's part of the exercise and part of the learning that's going on.
So as part of the chairman's, observation is sort of knit this together. Maybe there's some type of, peer group. You don't have to name them, but you can say peer group A, B, or C. We benchmark in these categories, versus these developers.
And my bias is, Louis, we need to be a little further out the risk curve.
Yes.
Because if we aren't, others won't get there.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, we can
Agreed.
take risk that the others can't.
Yep.
It needs to be measured and disciplined and intentional, but we can take some risk because we can absorb because others can't. So
Totally agree.
those are the kind of things that we've wrestled with over the years about where we make our bets and the like, but yeah, you're spot on with that. Okay. All right, great.
It's
Thanks,
an
Alexis,
exciting
you
time.
can say.
It is.
It's an exciting time.
Yeah. So as Canals is expiring, we're bringing new excitement to the table.
He won't stay on you too long, Dave.
No, I love beating it, that's good. It's just, got a horse, you gotta ride it, so take it as a badge of honor, all right? Okay, couple committee reports, starting with finance. We had a meeting a couple, 3 weeks ago, September 17th. You've already heard from Adam about one outcome, which was approving the green bond issuance and the incredibly outstanding execution that followed from that. But in addition, a few other items to bring forward to the board for approval. One was the release of our fourth quarter allocation, 27 million in support of canals. Two, we had a lengthy discussion relative to certain prepay agreements and the issuance of the tax exempt bonds and development corporation and the nuances of all of that. That was also then fed into a discussion about the formation of a subsidiary, wholly owned subsidiary in connection with the renewables initiatives, initial funding there of $100 million to support that endeavor in 2025. We already mentioned the green bond issuance. The White Plains office building, well, it's not what we see out the window, something similar to undertake that initiative with Hamilton Green and Partners and initially fund up to $50 million in connection with that. Great discussion around workforce development funding, some really exciting programs and initiatives and opportunities there that we want to progressively lean into. Authorize 2.5 million, 2.55 million to be It was specific to 6 or 7 different initiatives and programs. We got on-call engineering services for power generation, transmission, and ancillary facilities for 8-10 different consulting and consultant organizations totaling 25 million. Statewide canal structure inspection support services. Another series of contract approvals for the next several years for up to 25 million. And an IBM Maximo application suite migration and software optimization funding for 11.6 million. So those were the outcomes of that meeting to hopefully refresh everyone's memory. If I could, I'd ask for a motion to approve those initiatives.
So moved.
All right, Dennis, thank you. A second.
Second.
Lewis, thank you very much. Unless there's any other discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay. As Alexis indicated, no, I don't, yeah, risk, no, I don't have a risk and resilience report, right? We just.
I do.
We do.
I'll be brief,
thought we
but I
did,
don't
yeah.
want to miss
Sorry.
anything, so I'm gonna look at the script here, just because I want to make sure I don't forget. We also met on September 17th, 2024. Chief Risk and Resilience Officer Harley introduced 3 agenda items: mid-year enterprise risk results, a merchant portfolio hedging program update, and a physical security update. So those were the 3 main topics of discussion. The mid-year enterprise report included an overview of the NYPA and Canal's risk assessment results. The key takeaway at that our meeting on September 17th was that there's no major movements in the risk scores since the 2023 year-end update. The profile remains stable, good news. And this is common for enterprise risks when there's not a significant shift or disruption. It was also noted that a new controllability factor has been added to risk management and controls scoring model. Considering controllability helps with assessment and prioritization of mitigation strategies and controls. The merchant portfolio hedging update recapped our programmatic approach, which layers on hedges throughout the year to reduce downside risk and stabilize revenue outcome. And as we go toward our end of year, we anticipate 2025 hedge percentage will be slightly over the approved minimum targets. 26 and 27 are expected to be on target. We'll be making an annual review of the multi-year hedging strategy in this quarter, the last quarter of the year. Physical security update pointed out the similarities and differences of physical security needs at NYPA and canals, but despite the differences, there's common mitigation strategies and controls used across both organizations. The dog, the drones, intelligence monitoring tools, and mass notification systems. And along that line, something Alexis and I talk about all the time is communication across all of the parts of NYPA and canals, so that she's meeting regularly with people who have different roles in the authority, but all of the roles are intertwined. And I think that's key for risk, is that everybody's talking to everybody else so that there's no surprises. And I really appreciate that with Alexis's staff. We had no business we had to take care of other than adopting the minutes from July 16th, which we did. And I don't think we meet again until 2025, although I'm sure we'll have an update at our December meeting. And always, Alexis, thank you for your work and the work of your staff. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Cecily. Appreciate that recap. Cecily mentioned no votes needed there, so thank you for that update. Last item on our agenda is consent agenda. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to peruse and at least take a look there. As always, there's a number of recommendations on the customer solutions front. Maribel, you want to hit some highlights there for us?
Yes, we do. And since I think I'm 1 minute shy of noon, good morning. Chairman, trustees, NYPA leadership, members of the public, thank you for allowing me a few moments to just go over some of the items from our consent agenda. And I'll wrap up with some insights of my tours around New York State. We do have 8 recommendations in front of you today, but I'll just go into 2 of them. One will be an award to a business named Air Company Holdings. And we're excited to bring this customer to your attention as they will be developing sustainable aviation fuel, or otherwise known as SAF. And so we are recommending an award of 3 megawatts of replacement power and 6.9 megawatts of high load factor power. Now, why we're so excited about this one is not only will they be developing sustainable aviation fuel, but some of the byproducts will be renewable diesel and alcohol. So we see this company as a potential global solutions finder and global contributor to decarbonization, in addition to CLCPA goals and greenhouse gas emissions. So what they are committing to in their contract is 17 new green jobs and $30 million in capital expenditures in New York State. So a very important award. The second item that I'd like to go over is earlier this year, we came to you with our Recharge New York program in our compliance, our annual compliance review. We're coming to you today with our Western New York and Preservation Power compliance reporting. This is part of our contract obligations. Customers are mandated to provide an annual report on their job standings, their capital expenditures, and their power usage. Now, the reason why we're bringing this to you is although 97% of our customers reported, which is it's a goal we always strive for 100% reporting. We don't always get 100%. We did have to suspend 2 customers that did not. We will continue to work with them to see if we can obtain a report. If not, it's something that we just are mandated to do as stewards of these programs, as administrators of this program. We will continue to work with customers to understand their operations, their usage, and keep them in good standing. Positive news from this compliance reporting is that customers as a program overall, as a whole, they are reporting 131% job achievement, job compliance. So some customers are going above and beyond their job commitments. For capital expenditures, 414%. And so it's just astounding to see how much investment. Now, these are the highest in 4 years since 2020, obviously taking into account the pandemic, but it is still really promising to see how much these businesses are growing and sticking to their commitments. What I do want to say is note that, customers are taking advantage of the federal and state grants that are being awarded across the state. I want to wrap up. I'm wrapping up my 8th week of touring around New York State. Had a great chance to work with many of our business partners. It's not just customer solutions. We have about 100 employees in the customer solutions team located around the entire state. So a lot of what's been talked about today, it's in partnership with our finance team, with our external affairs team, our legal team. We're talking to customers about contract extensions. I'll say this at every meeting. There's no bigger compliment than a repeat customer. Justin started us off this morning by talking about the tough conversations that we're having with our customers about rate increases. We're talking about innovative projects that we're working on together in innovation. Clarkson University talking to us about the research projects that they want to work with us on. But the one thing that I'm going to say is in the face of tough news, which is rate increases, is a continued expression of gratitude for the amount of information that we're sharing with them and the transparency in which we are sharing this information with them at. And so that is a true trusted advisor. So I'm very proud that we're part of the customers are part of the renewables effort, that they're front and center in the strategy, Vision 2030 renewed. And so we will continue that work, traveling across the state and working as one NYPA, issuing one comprehensive, support to our customers. So thank you all.
Thanks, Maribel. One other thing I'll highlight for asking for a motion. We met earlier this morning and pleased to welcome Salman Ali to NYPA as our new leader of our internal audit function, I think Senior Vice President officially. So Salman, again, welcome to NYPA. We're excited to have you. And unless there's any other questions or comments, I'd ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. All right, Dennis, thank you. Lori, second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. And that's a wrap. So unless there's any other items to come before us, I'm happy to request a motion to adjourn the meeting. So moved. Lori, second. Dennis, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. We're back together in a couple months, December 10th officially. By then, maybe we've had a Subway Series, Mets and Yankees. New president. We'll definitely have one of those, and stay safe. Enjoy the holidays. Happy Halloween. Happy Thanksgiving. Obviously, as trustees, we got a busy couple months, a lot of offline activities. So we'll be back to you with our game plan relative to all of that and coordinate calendars and the like. Thanks as always very much for your time and effort and attendance today. Enjoy.
Thank you.